Well, hi everyone, and welcome to Feminists Talk Back. I'm Kristi, and for this episode, a bonus round of questions that we didn't have time to answer in the last episode, I'm joined by three fantastic people. I'm going to go in the order in which they appear on the bottom of my screen. So the first person up is Kristi, a person I always enjoy chatting with. Actually, everybody I have on my show I enjoy chatting with. But Kristi, do you want to tell us a little bit about the most recent video you put out on your channel?
The actual most recent one I put out was a mirror of Electric Mayhem Ashley's video about white fragility, which has stimulated quite a bit of conversation, so that's always good. Let's say it's good. No, actually, I think it is good, you know, even if it gets a little tough sometimes. And prior to that, I had my last video was another effing bearing video where I sort of address a lot of the comments and questions I had gotten about having an avatar that was a copyrighted image and bearing getting in trouble for an avatar that was a copyrighted image and going through just all of that. So that was
Yes, that was fun too.
No, that part wasn't as much fun.
The local museum we have here, I was showing a guest around who's in town, and they had, is it pronounced Lichtenstein, the artist?
I say Liechtenstein, and I'm probably wrong.
Yeah, that's all right. The appropriation artist, and they had some of his artwork, you know, for sale on postcards and other things. And I thought about your video and what you had said about it and the art theory behind it. So I appreciated that. I learned something from you.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, next up we have Michael not Rollins. It's hard for me.
No, it's the other one. It's the first one.
It's the Rollins. Okay, like a Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
Roland.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Michael Rollins.
That was my entire primary school. Thanks.
Sorry to bring back bad memories, but let's
trigger.
Let's talk about some good memories. What's the most recent video you've put up on your channel?
Well, actually, the most recent video I put up was a response to our other guest right here, Mr. Motivator Opinion. He said some really mean things about me and about the state of my room, basically. And I just set him straight. He's basically a liar and a fraud, and so I had to set him straight. It's a bit of drama, but you know that's how it goes. That's what YouTube's all about.
There is a lot of drama on YouTube. So Tim, the third guest on the show tonight from Devotivator Opinion channel. Yeah, you want to talk about your video and your beef with Michael here?
Well, basically, I mean, the backstory is Michael came home from his trip, made a video, and then Bearing responded. So I decided, you know what, like I'm basically central to this fight. And so I made sure to get involved because I really care about it, not because I just wanted to be part of it.
You need to mind your own business, mate. You need to mind your own damn business.
I just genuinely thought Michael's room is a mess and he shouldn't make videos while his room is so messy because it's disrespectful to all of his fans and all of Bearing's fans and my family. So I just thought I had to
think about the Bearing fans, Michael. Think about the Bearing fans.
Yeah. I mean, some people were pointing out my room was also messy, but I think it was not that messy, to be honest. So, I mean, I don't feel like I'm a hypocrite.
Well,
anyway,
you know,
I said all I needed to say in the video, so you know.
Yeah, we're gonna put that outside the show here, and you know, it might flare up from time to time, but.
For the record, I mean, my video was about the ideas, his room, his idea, his video was personal. It was about me.
I explained those ideas. I explained every single idea. I pointed to the ideas, and I went through everything logically. You know, so if you can't accept that, you're dreaming, mate.
That was excuse making. Anyways, on with the show. This is getting tense.
Well, let's break the tension by talking about some of the more annoying questions or points that we see in our comments.
Always agree. Why do they never call each other out?
That's true. You guys both called each other out, so there's an example. Non-groupthink.
Yep.
Anyways, I'll clean up the power cable. Someone was saying that was a hazard. So.
I haven't read any of the comments yet, but
the books are neatly stacked. All right.
One of the annoying questions that we talked about before the show was the assumption behind the question, why do you hate men? And I might start with Cece on here again for alphabetical order reasons about what is your reaction to people who write comments such as, why do you hate men?
That one gets exasperation because, you know, if you knew my life, I live with all guys. I have 3 boys and a husband. I've got nothing but men in my house. And if I hated men, boy, would I be miserable, you know. But I don't at all. So it's just kind of like, oh God, shut up. You
Yeah,
know?
I think there's a lot of conflation of the idea of social structures that have been dominated by men and passed on sort of from one generation of men to the other, and women are trying to break into that and the difficulties that women have in doing that, and then making it personal. A criticism of patriarchy isn't a criticism of you as a man if you're a man listening to someone talk about patriarchy, but I think that people tend to conflate that. So, do you have anything else on that comment?
Yeah, I guess I think that they conflate it sometimes and then don't conflate it other times. Like they seem to be able to get it if it goes with their points, to be honest, that feminism isn't women and patriarchy isn't men, but then, you know, a different argument will come up and then all of a sudden that changes again. So I just there aren't many arguments that I just immediately dismiss, but this would probably be one of them because I've just been around this too much. I know that this is nonsense, so it's like, go on. Goodbye.
Yes. I imagine Michael and Tim don't get that question, but maybe you do. Have you been ever asked why you hate yourself? I'll go to Michael and then I'll come back to Tim. I
get asked if I hate myself all the time because of all the terrible things that I do to myself, like going bald and painting my nails. So I obviously hate myself. But I mean, the only interaction, I mean, I've had it occasionally from people, but my first big interaction with why do you hate men was Sargon of Akkad's Feminists Hate Men video, which is basically that he finds he finds feminist arguments or something or other that attack I suppose ideas that oppress women and then conflates that with hatred for men, and so my conclusion was it's not hatred for like the system or the oppressive systems, and it's not necessarily hatred. It's a criticism of that does not equal hatred for men. You're conflating 2 completely different things, but they lap it up left, right, and center. So
for repeating something that you already believe. Yes.
Sorry.
They lap it up with a frenzy of echo chambers.
Yeah.
Now I should say that Tim you don't label yourself as a feminist, but you agree with a lot of the feminist principles. You are more of a liberal progressive, not in the classical sense, but in the 21st century sense of the word liberal. Do you ever get any of that kind of comment, like either why do you hate yourself as a man because you agree with feminist positions, or have you seen it around?
Yeah, all the time, constantly. And I find it really interesting because, I mean, no matter what they want to say about me, just because I have a point of view that they disagree with, I am a man. I am a male of the species. And I don't hate myself. I mean, sure, I talked about like depression and issues that I have, like self-esteem and all that kind of stuff, but none of that ever had anything to do with my relationship with women. That was something that just formed from just like growing up, just being in the world. None of it had anything to do with having some kind of obedience to women or some desire to like suck up to them and always do what they wanted, and that's why I think feminism is okay. And there's all this kind of like mental psychoanalysis that goes on online about like why I think the things that I think, and then they always come back to the conclusion it must be because you hate the fact you're a man and you hate men. And that's never been effective for me. I'm very comfortable being a man. I have absolutely like no problem being male. So I don't, I think that's just goofy. It's literally just, I have a different point of view than you. You don't like it. So you try to find some way to undermine me and say, you must hate yourself. It's the only possible way that you could disagree with my views on feminism and, progressivism and liberalism. But I think it's just ridiculous. And I have one example on my Ask FM. Somebody asked me the question, like, why do you let women push you around? And I was like, what? I don't let women push me around. I don't, like, I had one girlfriend that was kind of abusive, and she was kind of a jerk, but that had nothing to do with feminism. She was just kind of a jerk on a personal level. In my general life, I don't let women push me around. So they literally extrapolated that from me having a different point of view on like feminism. They decided, oh, it must be because he's trying to get laid, or he's weak, or he lets women push him around. It's like, no, I stand up for myself. It doesn't matter if it's male or female. So I find the very concept to just be a general impression of just feminism, that it can only be motivated through weakness of some kind rather than any real values. Whereas for me, it's definitely more about values to me, to be sure.
It's like they don't want to, they probably think the conclusion that they've reached about the world, which is that feminism is full of shit, is like a logical, rational decision, right? And so then they can't think that the people who have reached a decision that feminism is not that are thinking logically or rationally. So they have to find something else that has led them to believe that stuff. I think that
Yeah, but I mean, what women do I let push me around? Do they just mean that I'm not like a total rude asshole to random feminists online, therefore I must be a sap? Is that what it is?
They have to like, they have to think, well, to believe this stuff, he must have had some, lesbian feminist bitch. He's being cuckolded. You're being a cuck. That's the whole thing. You're being a cuck because you wouldn't believe this sort of stuff if you hadn't some woman you wanted to sleep with. So she's forcing her opinions on you, and you're having to believe them. Otherwise, she won't sleep with you, even though she doesn't because she's a lesbian.
I would say the most problems that I've gotten psychologically were probably from, because I went to an all boys school, was probably from like men being like bullies or being douchebags. It wasn't from women, so I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Anyways,
I would think that there's some. Oh, sorry. You go ahead, Michael, and then I'm going to jump in.
I was just going to say, I don't think that any of these people actually have interacted with a real life feminist, and so they get their ideas about what feminism is and how people believe it and stuff from other people who also probably have never interacted with a feminist, like Sargon of Akkad or the Amazing Atheist or whatever. These guys who they get all their information about feminists from anti-feminists, and so they just believe that same stuff. They never actually interact with any feminists, and so their ideas about why anyone would believe this stuff is just completely stupid. It makes no sense.
Yeah, and those guys obviously do not listen to what feminists think. So how could they possibly have an understanding of feminism? They don't listen. So yeah,
it's like a self-repeating circle. They say stuff that is not true and don't listen to feminists about what feminism actually is. They just say a bunch of stuff to the audience, and that audience enjoys it because that's the stuff that they believe, and so that they then feed back to the person who says the stuff that isn't true, and then it's just kind of a circle that goes around and around in circles.
Yeah, I think that's one of the motivations for this show, is to get actual feminists to talk about issues in their own words, rather than having it always come on YouTube, at least through the filter of an anti-feminist lens, because there's a lot more of that in terms of content than this kind of stuff out there. Yep. And I would draw a parallel to that question with the fact that I'm a white American, and I am outraged at the attempts across the country, but in particular in North Carolina, to suppress the African American community vote by eliminating souls to the polls, restricting the kinds of IDs that can be valid, to having voter ID, at all, when there's such a low amount of voter fraud in terms of in-person voting going on. The way that they're, manipulating things in order to give more political capital in terms of voting power to the white residents in comparison with all the others. That doesn't mean I hate white people, because I find that outrageous. Like Tim said, this is about a principle of equality. And in this case, you've got a white dominated legislature who also are Republicans. And so it's not all white people, you know, but there is a group who are predominantly white, who are basically keeping political power in the hands of people who look like them and actively working to reduce the political power of people who don't. That's the issue. It's the same thing with feminism. It's about the issue. So I'm going to throw it over to Cece because she's been like listening, and I want to know her thoughts on how the conversation is, how it's gone.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I was just going to say, you've been quiet, so I thought that before we wrap up it. So I don't mean to scare you. Suddenly I'm going to put you on the spot. But yeah, I just thought I'd throw it over to you to see if you have any closing thoughts on this, because we're going to move on to another question or point.
No, I was listening, but I didn't. I was just sort of chilling out. I didn't. Right now, the kids are quiet, but
how
that
lovely.
could change.
Yeah, it's
So-
unusual. Not hearing any screaming and chaos.
Are they too
Anything too
quiet?
loud.
Yeah, sometimes they're too quiet.
Right, they're planning
No.
something.
They're
Well,
plotting.
They're plotting your demise.
it's been a long vacation week. There's been a lot of fighting. It's like we bought you 100 new toys. Well, not really 100, but a whole bunch of new toys, and all you could do is find the one that you both want to fight over. Like, just go away.
Damn kids.
Capitalism.
Now, I know that, Cece, you had a question that you came up with, but I didn't remember the wording of it. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I'll skip to the next one. But if you want to think about what it is and make a note or whatever, if you remember the one we talked about. But the other question that I had, it's not really a question, it's a point in the first episode of the last episode of Feminist Talk Back, so part 1. Natalie Alford, who is also an American, and I were talking about, we're answering a question that had to do with rights, equal rights between men and women. And for part of that conversation, we focused on the constant attacks by Republicans on reproductive access, reproductive health care facilities, even Planned Parenthood services in general, and how problematic that was for millions of American women. And I think Bering made a response, because I had a whole bunch of people coming into the comments, and they were saying things like, oh, but men can't get custody, you know, that in every single case. Or they were talking about the fact that if a woman decides to have an abortion, a man can't stop her, and where are men's reproductive rights? And I find this irritating, because asking a question about a different group doesn't negate the harm being done to women when Republicans attack their reproductive health care. And it could be this issue, but this is just an example of how it tends to go, I think, in some conversations, which is that people will try to refute feminism by changing the subject to the sort of a list of men's issues, which is, tends to be custody issues, or men have to have pay for children if they impregnate a woman, but they don't have a choice about that, or these kinds of things. So I wanted to get the panel's thoughts on that.
Yeah, what about the men? This is well,
Man, where?
no, I mean, do you know, I was reading about Benjamin Franklin today. Now, I don't know who likes history or not. It was interesting to me, though. He was a newspaper guy, and in the beginning of his life career, he did a lot of writing under pseudonyms, and he liked to write under women's pseudonyms, and he often liked to write about things like the issues that women have. He also occasionally would write under men's pseudonyms too, and it's kind of funny because sometimes he would kind of argue with himself. He was like a proto troll or a poe of some sort, because he would come up with these really complicated, like when he was 16, he wrote as Silence Dogood, who was supposedly the widow of a minister, and she had like a whole backstory.
The best he could come up with.
Well, back in the day,
wouldn't really fly on the internet at the moment, would it?
Oh, this Silent Do-Good sounds like a real person.
Sounds legit to me.
Well, I think it was assumed it would be not a real name, but at the same time,
good point. Yeah.
Back in that time, because of Puritan norms, there were a lot of weird names, like, you know, I don't know, Patience, Constance, sitting around and being nice and quiet. You know,
Cotton Mathers. Cotton Mathers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Patience do good.
Yeah. I mean,
eventually
there
it
was
will pay off.
Chastity, no sex.
basically, yeah. So that's where. What the hell was I talking about?
Just some
He was
random
writing under
interesting
men and
point.
women's names. So he was
He was
writing
writing under men and women's names, and it was always so he would be writing as a woman and talking about issues like he had one woman that was supposedly on trial for fornication because she was pregnant with a man's baby and she wasn't married, and she was writing all this stuff about how men can just go on, they don't care, you know. And of course responses that came in were all the what about the men. It's always what about the men. So my point was, no matter how far back you go, that's a response, you know. Could be Ben Franklin talking about women and fornication laws, and somebody's going to say, well, what about the men, you know. So it's just,
Yeah,
I don't know why, but
yeah. How about you, Michael?
It just makes you think about, like, you know, like a child at like a primary school who's been bullied, who goes to the principal and complains about being bullied, and then people say, yeah, but what about that kid over there who's been bullied? It just doesn't solve any problems. You're just completely ignoring the issue that this kid has, or, you know, the kid or woman or whatever, you know, the analogy, that there's an issue here that needs to be fixed, and just deflecting that and being like, what about this thing over here? Doesn't matter what the fuck it is. It's ridiculous. It's the same with, like, you know, what about women in the Middle East? Why? It's that whole relative privation fallacy thing that I think Chris did a really good video about. You know, what about this thing over here that is completely irrelevant to the thing that you're talking about here? Just because there's a problem elsewhere that you deem to be more important than the issue that's being brought up, doesn't mean that it is more important and that people should be focusing on that. Why does your opinion about what is the most important thing mean that is the most important thing? And you could just, or you can always find something that's more important. If that's your kind of measure for what is, you know, you can always find a thing that is going to be more important. Where you say, okay, what about the men? Okay, we'll say, what about you know, the animals? You know, animals have rights. Why are we not talking about animals' rights? Why are we not talking about space travel? Why are we not talking about you know, black you know, black holes? Because, you know, black hole. Why are we not talking about the inevitable heat death of the universe? Because, you know, let's be honest, that's going to affect everyone in a couple of billion years from now. So let's forget all this feminism bullshit and just you know, be nihilists.
Oh, it's so exhausting.
I know.
It's a big Lebowski reference.
So it just makes no sense. I don't understand that line of reasoning at all. But
yeah, it's just a distraction technique to get you off the topic. Right. Yeah. So Tim, have you come across that? I'm sure you have, or something like it.
Of course, yeah. But I mean, the way I think about this is that, of course, if you make an original point about something and somebody says, what about, you know, these Muslim people raping lots of people or whatever, it's like, all right, yeah, that is okay. That is an important thing. That is something that matters because, you know, Islam is a patriarchal structure in itself that oppresses women, and anybody raping anybody is a big problem. It doesn't matter who it is. And we should talk about that. But the thing is, that is so often used as some kind of way of just acting like the original point doesn't exist. And that's what gets so frustrating. For example, in the whole, because this is like a different topic, but in the whole like fight with Bering or whatever that was going on, I would make the point that, you know, oh, Bering tried to intimidate, you know, Danny, the Stubino in an email or whatever. And the instant response that I would get back would be like, yeah, but like a year or like 2 years ago, Kevin Logan and this is completely unproven, so I'm just waiting for this to be completely taken out of context and totally mangled. Disclaimer, this is not proven. I have no idea if it's true. Please don't take me out of context. Please don't destroy my words. Like, oh, Kevin Logan helped Jenny McDermott do a false rape accusation on Ahmed Skeptic. And as I said, I have no idea if that's true. But how is that...
Not true.
Yeah. I mean, but that was one of the talking points I got back. Someone just threw that back at me. I'm like, A, I don't even know if it's true. B, what the hell's that got to do with like Bering's action in this specific case? Can't we first talk about what Bering did in his email and then wait a little bit, after we've had this initial conversation about the first topic, maybe we can move on to that second topic and see if it has some validity. But
see,
saying
they don't...
somebody did something a year or two ago is not a specific response to the thing that I said. It's a different topic, That irritates me so much when you're like, holy shit, you just punched someone in the face. And it's like, hey, what about that guy who punched someone in the face 2 years ago? You're like, he did? What about... Well, I have to go look that up, see if it's true. And even if it is true, what the fuck does it have to do with the first guy punching the person in the face? Like, nothing, Two wrongs make a right?
They don't actually care about that thing until they can use it as ammunition either. Like, I highly doubt that they would be caring about that issue. In that case, the whole thing about Kevin Logan or whatever, were they trying to figure out and solve that issue before this? No, they were only they're using it specifically now as ammunition to bring down the stupid feminist. I mean, Sargon does it all the time.
It's it's monolithing as well. It's like,
yeah, exactly. It is.
Like, for example, Laughing Witch, you had the whole drama a few years ago. There was like, well, what do you have to say about Laughing Witch? And I'm like, well, I wasn't really around then. And I disagreed with her letter writing campaign, and I can disagree with what she did respectfully and say it's not something I do, but it was a legal thing to do. You can write a letter to somebody and they can look at the letter and say that's bullshit, and there can be like law issues and stuff, but I wasn't really involved with all of that, and I don't really know Laughing Witch very well, so why the fuck are you asking me about it? Like, we're not like the same person, we don't believe all the same things, we're not, that's just monolithing. Basically, like, you are responsible for every person who is somewhat related to your point of view. Even if you had nothing to do with that situation and you said that you disapproved of it already, like, what the fuck do you want,
Well, you might be interested in this, Tim, because I was around for that when it happened, and these were the sequence of events. And Kevin's done a video on this, so I'm not saying anything that he hasn't already told people on his channel. He made a comment to Jenny in a private message saying he had heard this. And she took that and made a video about it, saying that it was a fact. And he, when she was pushed on it, she said that Kevin was her source, using the contents of a private message to throw someone under the bus. And that's actually why she and I ended up falling out, because I took the side that, look, Kevin said that, but when you made that your video, then it was your responsibility to fact check. Someone's got a bird in the background. Sorry.
That was probably me.
Okay, yeah, if you can just mute yourself, I'll take this bit out. Like, you can mute yourself when you're not on. Yeah.
Well, it's that loud.
It's that loud. Yeah.
Okay.
And so Jenny and I had a falling out because I told her, look, once you made a video, those became your words, not Kevin's, right? So it was up to you to fact check it and do independent verification before you made that accusation. And you were wrong. And that's why she and I fell out. And we've sort of had thaws in between, but we've basically not really been friends since she made that video. And the parallels between what happened to you, Tim, with a private conversation being taken and used by someone attributing things to you without your permission, and not owning the statements, it happened again. So I just thought you would be interested in, and you can point that out to people who bring up Kevin Logan and Jenny McDermott in the future.
Well, I mean, but it's just really annoying that it's like, every single time I say anything about anything, it's always like, but what about this person you barely know did something ages ago? It's like, fuck, can't we just talk about the thing we're talking about now? And then
what about
if you want
Bill Clinton and his scandal in the White House? What about that?
Yeah.
What about Watergate?
Just like you.
What
Nixon's
JFK's
on the right.
Assassination.
Yeah. But it's like, you can talk about that, but could you bring it up like separately instead of using other events as a constant cudgel to avoid talking about the original topic? And that's just like the most common thing you ever see online. Like it's the most common debate tactic ever. It's like, oh, so you say there's a problem with the pay gap. Well, what about this thing over here, which is barely related? It's like, what about it?
I don't see anti-feminists making videos doing in-depth research on, for instance, let's say, again, being Americentric, the United States, and looking at the number of divorces that happen every year, the number that are actually where custody is contested, then narrowing down those where custody is given out on either, like a 50-50 basis or something that the parties manage to agree after some negotiations, to when the judges make a decision in favor of one parent or the other, and compare when the father gets primary custody versus when the woman does, and look at how many cases each year there actually are. I'm not saying that because there aren't a lot of cases, it's not an issue we should talk about. But when you try to compare that to women of reproductive age across the United States, which has 323, I think, million people in it, the impact of having a Supreme Court justice who will say Roe v. Wade is overturned will be nationwide, and it will profoundly impact women's lives, whereas men can appeal custody decisions, or mothers can appeal custody decisions later on, and when the kids get older too, they might decide they want to live with one parent versus the other. So I don't see the anti-feminist side actually presenting facts about this. I hear a lot of talk, but I don't see a lot of numbers, and I don't see any activism at all.
That's what I mean about, like, I only really ever see these dudes using issues like this as ammunition against feminism. Like I like Sargon linked an article yesterday about something about how some Muslim people were taking children and using them as hostages or life hostages or some shit. And he was just like, I suppose I'll share this because a certain female rights movement isn't sharing it. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I've seen so many times him just using issues that previously he probably wouldn't care about. He would only use them so he can use them as ammunition against feminism. Like he wouldn't. No one talks about this stuff until they can use it as a cudgel to beat feminism with.
But you want to know something really fucked up that nobody ever talks about, and I never see people talking about it on YouTube, is child brides and child marriage.
Yeah,
and that
right.
happens a lot in India and Bangladesh and countries around there and Southeast Asia. You never hear about it. And that's like predominantly Hinduism, isn't it? No one talks about it. And why is that? Does just nobody care about child brides, or is it just, Islam is the hot topic, so people just ignore that? But, theoretically, you could just say, why do you never talk about child brides? Why don't you talk about child brides? Why are you never talking about child brides? And just say that all the time. Whenever anybody brings up Islam, say, what about child brides in India and Bangladesh and Pakistan and Nepal? What about that? No one ever talks about it.
If Sargon listens to this, he'll find some articles about it and be like, why is feminism not talking about this? There you go.
Right, but why isn't anti-feminism talking about it? It's like just certain topics
well, it is
are
now.
popular.
It is now. Yeah, I'm talking about it before you, so I'm better. So yeah, feminism.
Child brides in that area of the world is not a popular topic. Like people just don't seem to talk about it. Does that mean everyone else is a cuck? Like what?
Kristi, you turned your mic on. So
yeah, I just want to say, if you care about something, do something about it. I mean, it's not activism to go around to other activist groups and annoy them. It doesn't do anybody any good.
What about the child brides? I'm just going to say that throughout the rest of this hangout. What about the child brides?
Kristi has done a video on child brides.
Thank you. You saved me from virtue signaling.
In America, no less. Even.
Sargon.
Anyway.
Did Sargon do it?
I haven't a clue. But
and he doesn't care. He doesn't care about it.
Since you have the floor, do you remember the question that you wanted to raise?
Yes.
Sorry, I'll shut up now.
It was basically, why do we think women are so weak and helpless and can't do anything? And that's the way it gets. Or they'll say something like, I'm not a feminist because I think women are equal and I don't think that they're special or they need more help than anybody else. And yeah.
Did you guys see Varmint Coyote's video about watching one of his first videos and him talking about things about, like, you know, he's an egalitarian, he's not a feminist, or she, sorry, I'm really sorry. That was my bad. She, self-correcting here, was saying that.
You can just edit that out later.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
No, I don't mind self-correcting on air because I'm learning. I have trans friends, and it's a conscious effort, you know, that I'm making, and I mess up sometimes, and then I ask their forgiveness, and they give it, and they still love me, and I love them, and we move on. So
Transparency.
yes, she said that the comments she was making really came from not really understanding the issues or the facts behind them. And the more she learned, the more she realized she was feminist, because feminism ends up erring on the side of, you know, looking at things from a perspective that women have been disadvantaged, and then evaluating the structures that lead to that. Now, part of that doesn't become, sometimes women aren't the ones who are disadvantaged. So what is it about patriarchy that puts men in these positions? So feminism works for both men and women, even though it has fem in the title. It's a critique of gender, sex, and gender roles, and gender identity, and gender politics in a society. And that's why I think more people, because they hear the buzzwords, but they don't understand the substance. So who wants to come in on that? Oh, I guess I have to call on people. Okay, Tim.
Yeah. I don't really have much to say on that. You should call on Kristi. She hasn't talked enough.
All right, we're handing it back to Kristi, since I guess it was your question.
That's well, and this is what I try to explain, is that it's not that I think that men are better than women or more capable than women. And it's not that I think white people are better or more capable than black people. It's the situation is different, not the people. So if white men were in the situation black women are in some opposite world somewhere, they would suck just as bad or do just as well, however you want to put it. You know, there's no difference there. It's the situation that I'm trying to fix, not so that the equality can actually come to the fore. But if you don't fix the underlying situation, you know, we are all just going to keep doing the same thing. And it's not going to be good because it won't lead to equality magically. It's just doesn't work that way. That's all.
For one semester. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Tim, then I'll tell my gender and politics.
I was just going to say, so you're not some kind of race realist person, because they're like, oh, all of the people have intrinsic qualities and it's always going to end out this way because one race is better or one gender is better or certain types of people are better, you know.
That's called essentialism. It's the idea that there are essential qualities that go along with physical characteristics. And a lot, social constructionism is the opposite. It says that those kinds of identities are built by individuals and their societies and highly influenced by their societies. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely on the constructionist side, and I am not an essentialist when it comes to how we have identities, such as, an ethnicity or a race. What does that even mean?
Kind of convenient that white straight people white straight men are the ones that win in that situation, isn't it? It's convenient. It's quite convenient.
Well, I'm just pretty sure, like, if this magical world that Kristi talks about existed where white men were the oppressed class, that the whole narrative would just change overnight. I don't think that they would really keep holding to that, really, because they'd be like,
of course not. Of course not.
They'd be like, oh, we are the losing group of people. That means that we must be intrinsically worse. No, that's not how it is. There's all this oppression against us, and we're really being overruled by tyranny, and we have to fight back, and it would all change. It would just become like they'd have this activist spirit, like we have to fight the system. But while while white people or men or whoever are on top, like it suits their narrative to say, like, the only way that we could be taken over would be through some nefarious means, basically, because we are the superior ones, we are the better ones in society. So
I think isn't it kind of funny that I was just going to say, isn't it kind of funny that the whole white supremacist kind of tagline is victim playing, is like playing the victim as well, as being like, what's this whole white genocide thing that white men are actually the ones that are oppressed. It's just kind of funny that people always complain about how feminists and women are playing the victim and all that sort of shit, and now it's white dudes who feel insecure about their whiteness because people are getting fucking woke, that now they're all like, oh, but we're being oppressed and we're being genocided. It's just kind of funny, I think.
Well, that's how it moves around. It's like while they're on top, it's because they have superior traits. But
it's
when
funny
they're
'cause
not on top, it's some
still on
kind of
top, though.
like massive
It's-
oppression.
Yeah, but it's not like anything's radically changed. It's not like white straight people aren't still, up there.
Oh no, it's based on what mood they're in.
They're feeling threatened. Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I mean, some white cis dude like me walks around, and I'm like, yeah, I think we're doing pretty well. And then some other white cis dude walks around, and he's all like, A, we're either superior race, or B, we're being oppressed because we're weak, and it's some kind of overarching oppressions. It's like it just
Because I
depends
can't
who
grab
you
onto the other
are.
pussy
So,
anymore. I'm being
yeah, I
oppressed.
think we're doing fine, and I don't see anything fucking wrong with saying that white cis people are doing fine. Like, where's the tragedy on that statement? Of course, not all. Come on.
Yeah. But
Hashtag
if you
white
talk about
genocide.
in the aggregate. In the aggregate.
Yes, exactly. It doesn't mean that white people don't suffer. I mean, come on, they're human beings. We're all fucking humans. I'm a humanist. It's just, it's ridiculous to not look around the world and not be able to admit, like, okay, white cis males like myself are doing pretty good comparatively. And it doesn't change the fact that everyone has problems. It's a direct comparison.
When I was still doing my postdoctoral fellowship, or maybe it was my PhD, I can't remember, but I taught a 1-semester course on gender and politics in London University. And we had an evening where the faculty came from the politics department, and we sort of gave little spiels about our courses because the students were registering, and we were giving them a little flavor of what the course was about. And I'm going to tell this little story, or riddle, I guess it is. And if you know the answer, don't shout it out. But if you haven't heard it, if you want to try afterwards, it goes like this. A father and son are driving in a car, and tragically, there's a collision. The father is killed instantly, and the son is rushed to hospital, as they'd say in the UK, or the hospital in North America. The boy is wheeled into the emergency room, and the doctor on call looks down at the boy and says, I can't operate on this child. He's my son. Who is the doctor?
The mother.
Right.
Dr. Kevorkian?
But a lot of people will say his grandfather, because the idea of a woman being a surgeon in an emergency room, it requires a step that's beyond what we're seeing in the media and what we've experienced a lot in our lives. And
I will admit, for the first 2 or 3 seconds, I was like, wait a second, the dad died in the... Oh, it's the mum! Ah!
Yeah.
I defeated the patriarchy!
I instantly pictured some old dude. I have to gotta be honest.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That's
and
funny.
that doesn't mean you hate men. It just means that you've grown up in a society where all of the people who occupied the bodies that have occupied that role have more times than not been male bodies.
That means I just love old dudes in white
there you go.
coats.
There you go.
I was watching last night Penn and Teller's Fool Us, right? And the first female comedian, magician, it was the first female magician I'd seen. She came on, this is in the middle of season 2. And there'd been other women who had come on, but they'd also had a male partner. So she was the first one I'd seen who was a full-on female magician. And she had a show in Vegas and things like this. It was really, really cool. But she talked about how she would have little girls come up to her after the show and be like, I thought magic was stupid, but now I want to be a magician. And she was like, that's the coolest thing ever because, women underrepresented in magic.
I have another related story, which is from a woman who had been ordained and was made a pastor and was sent to a very rural area. And she was the minister for that community for, about 10 years. And near that, sort of this 10-year mark, every Sunday, whatever, they would have this play area for the kids, and the kids would come in, and the kids would play church. They play preacher. And so the girls would have all the boys sit in the pews, and the girls would take turns being the preacher and giving the sermon. And the boys got mad at this because they wanted to be the preacher too. They thought this was kind of a rigged system, and they had a fight about whether or not boys could be preachers. So they went to her and said, Reverend, whatever her name was, Sally, can a boy be a preacher? And yeah, it's what you are raised with. It really has a powerful influence, and it shapes how you, consider things for the rest of your life. So when feminists point this stuff out, it's not to make men feel bad, or to make women angry at men. It's almost like step back out of yourself and be a little more self-reflective. Like, do you recognize some of your own thought patterns in these stories? And if so, well, that's a feminist critique right there. That's a feminist critique. That's a feminist lens applied to everyday life.
It's not about you. It's about the greater system. That's,
Well, on a personal level, noticing some kind of oppression has never had any negative impact on me. So I don't understand the talking point of people saying that it's some kind of like white, or yeah, like some kind of white guilt or male guilt, or like some kind of like, I've never particularly felt that, and actually had quite an interesting conversation with an anti-feminist who I was talking to, and he said that he grew up with a lot of male guilt because of the way that he had been treated by women or something, or like by ex-partners or etc. And I was surprised and legitimately like, what's that like, having male guilt? Because I don't relate to that. And maybe I should have some kind of guilt due to the patriarchal system, but I'm able to detach the oppression in the system from me on a personal level. I don't want to contribute to it in any way. And on a personal level, I would probably feel more guilty about like eating meat or something, because that hurts animals and I shouldn't do that. Or maybe I should contribute to charity more, that kind of thing. But on a personal level, I don't have any guilt about being a dude. I mean, I would if I was abusive to people on account of being a male, or like trying to oppress someone else, but
control, because it's like that's the difference between like giving to charity and eating meat and stuff. That's something you can control. I mean, the fact that you're a white straight guy, it's cis, that's not something you can control, and that's not something,
well,
so it's
I'm just saying I can recognize white cis male oppression of other groups, racism, homophobia, sexism, etc. All of these isms and negative things that white cis males are doing, without feeling personally that I am responsible or guilty of those things, but able to recognize them in the world and point it out and be like, I don't personally want to contribute to that, and that's not the kind of thing that I like. I mean, what's so complicated about that?
If I could step in, because my experience is a bit different growing up as an American, and as someone like Kristi who loves history, I loved my history courses. And as you go through them, through the educational system, there's a lot of really terrible things, not just uncomfortable, terrible things that the white majority did, importing slaves, enslaving people, and then maintaining that system. And yeah, we fought a civil war that was in part related to the issue of slavery. But even after the war was fought, the problem wasn't solved. Basically, they just, like with the, when people became serfs, or you freed them, okay, they could move around a little bit more, but they didn't have any assets. They didn't have any education. They had a whole lifetime of slavery. They didn't have any connections or ability to get a job somewhere else or communicate that there was a job open, let alone afford going to move there and finding a place. And so these systems remained, and even into the 1960s, when we had the civil rights movement, yes, there was a lot of legal advancements in court cases and in legislation, but we still haven't solved the social problem that was enacted. That was basically, the social problems were codified in law, but the social problems still can exist without the law because of people's attitudes and behaviors. So growing up and seeing white people doing this, I felt, it wasn't that I felt personally guilty, but I carried the weight of knowing that that was something that the America that I'm living in is a product of that. And as I grew older, I saw how, in the way that I was a white woman in a predominantly white state, lower middle class growing up, I had certain advantages that other people didn't have, just by virtue of to whom I was born. I didn't deserve or earn any of that. And I think I felt bad about it, in part because I couldn't do anything. But then I went on to realize that you can criticize the system and change it through your attitudes and spreading ideas so other people, because it's changing the attitudes and the ideas that's going to bring about the change, not passing laws. People didn't start supporting same-sex marriage after it became legal. It was already supported by some 60% of Americans before it became legal, because gay people came out, and people who were straight realized that they had a lot of gay friends and family members. And it was the change of attitude that really created the opening for marriage equality. So, I mean, it might be, again, a lot of this rhetoric tends to come out of an Americentric view, these critiques of like the course on the problem of whiteness, which if you just listen to me talk, you can understand why a critical theory course on the problem of whiteness would be quite interesting and self-reflective for a lot of people, and for other people, just, educational. Yeah, it's these attitudes that really need to get changed. It's not
we've got all that stuff here too in New Zealand. I mean, with the British Empire and the whole history there, and the them subjugating the natives, etc. So we've got all that as well.
Yes, I don't know to the extent, because I don't know about how your educational system works, about how much of that is actually part of the history class, but because of slavery and the Civil War, it's really quite a constant theme. And I don't know in New Zealand if they just do that, they kind of follow those developments over time, or they just go, here's a problem, and then it got solved.
No, it didn't get solved. I mean, it's ongoing. Like, there's negotiations between local tribes and the government constantly, and we have a much shorter history, but we did have a bunch of wars, and we did have a bunch of messed up shit happen ourselves. But I would definitely say slavery more significant.
I think it's more analogous to the African. Sorry, I think it's more analogous to the Native American thing in America.
Trail of Tears, genocide.
Yeah, I didn't even talk about the Native population issues. Yeah.
Well, so, I just want to quickly say though, let's say that white guilt fully is a thing, like totally 100%, absolutely. You are totally fully guilty. If I had a choice between acknowledging the issues of oppression and the systems of oppression and all of the things that are occurring in the world and in different countries that are horrible, and having, just terrible white male cis guilt or whatever, or contributing to the systems, not caring, basically just being part of a crowd that says, no big deal, I don't care about it, I'm not going to talk about it, and just laugh in the faces of oppressed people who are suffering from these things, I would choose the first one with the guilt, absolutely. Because I it doesn't even make sense as a choice, because I would probably feel more guilty in the second scenario, but given it's hypothetical, I guess I would have no conscience and would just be a scummy human being. So, I'd much rather care, basically.
So
yeah, I'd much rather care.
We're going to wrap this up and move on to our first question. But before I do, let's see.
That was not our first question? Where was the question?
The first question's on consent. We went off on a really interesting tangent, so I let it go. But so before we move on, Cece, you have any thoughts on where the conversation is gone?
I think it's people talk about white guilt, so I guess people must feel it. I don't. Kind of similar to what Tim was saying, I would feel guilty, except that I'm trying to change it. I'm trying to do something about it. I'm trying to not make the same mistakes all over again that have been made before, over and over and over. So why would I feel guilty? I guess I don't understand that reaction, because I don't feel it. So maybe that's part of what makes more progressive people more willing to be progressive, I guess, is they don't take it personally. They just sort of say, oh, okay, well, this is the situation, and now we're going to move on and fix the situation. It's just something I was born to. It's like feeling guilty because I have leaky pipes. They were just here when I moved in. That's what it is. So I would feel guilty if I just left them there to drip all over the place, but I'm not gonna, so I have nothing to feel guilty about.
It's a catch-22 because, if you didn't have a conscience, you wouldn't care about these issues. so you wouldn't have any guilt. Basically,
Do you think it's not like also a misunderstanding of, because guilt kind of implies that people are blaming you for something, right? So like, I often feel like when where I'm talking about an issue or whether other people are talking about an issue and people come and complain about that, then they're not actually understanding what's being talked about properly. It's like it's the patriarchy thing or rape culture or anything like that. They these people don't. When I say these people, I mean like anti-feminists or whatever. They don't seem to understand the issues actually, because they often come back with retorts that are completely irrelevant to what we're talking about, and so I feel like that could accumulate into a sort of guilt because they're getting the wrong impression. I mean, when people are talking about the issues that to do with whiteness and race and all that sort of thing, it's not about blaming anyone for you're not saying you're a white guy, you're a bad person, stop being so bad. That's not what's going on. It's about like we say, looking at the leaky pipes and fixing those. It seems to be a misunderstanding to me, not necessarily a lack of empathy, but I also think a lack of empathy kind of works its way into it as well.
I think there is an angle. Yeah. You guys ready to move on to consent?
Let's hit it.
All right, everyone's consent to move on. All right, excellent. So practicing what we preach. I'm going to throw this to Michael first so you can prepare. But the question from Ahierno is on consent. Could the panel give some examples of how to ask for consent in a way that doesn't break the mood?
Welcome into my bedroom, ladies and gentlemen. I don't really understand this sentiment. Like people, like I remember the first time I saw it was that fucking stupid ass Thunderfoot video where he was talking about how you'd ask, asking, "Are you okay?" or asking for consent all the time, but and it would break the mood or whatever. And,
didn't Shuan Head and Armored Skeptic do a video too on that?
Oh yeah, they did a a kind of mock up thing about it as well. And also like I've seen Teal Deer in his video about Lacey Green, which I have been covering in my ongoing series, Truth or Teal Deer, which I still think is hilarious. The idea that ongoing consent is going to be a mood killer, they take it to an extreme. They take it to like this idea that it's like, are you consenting now? Yes. Are you consenting now? Yes. Are you consenting now? Yes. It's not that. There are there's a big spectrum of how consent can happen, and you've kind of got to be aware of what's going on. Like if you're doing your thing and the girl's lying there, I'm saying this from a male perspective, obviously, and the girl's like lying there and just being like, or or she's like struggling or something. There's obvious signs in a person's body language which are gonna alert you to those things. But I mean, I also think it's bizarre because I do ask all the time. Like if I'm not all the time, but during a session, I don't know how to describe this, but saying, "Hey, are you okay?" Or if I get the impression that maybe things aren't okay, I might stop and say, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, okay." And then it never kills the mood. Maybe it's just because I'm such an amazing lover, but I don't know. It's never been a mood killer for me ever. So I don't know. I don't really understand that sentiment at all.
Yeah, I think it's coming from a positive place. I know the person, so I don't think it's a trick question, but it is one that it's good to bring up the extreme sides of it, and that people do take it to people mock it by taking it to ridiculous extreme, but that's not what's meant.
To be fair, sorry to interrupt you, Kristi, but to be fair, I don't know that I've really ever been in a like, I don't know this person very well, like a one night stand situation. That's not really a thing that I do. I whenever I sleep with someone, it's always after having hung out with them a whole bunch and really gotten to know the person pretty well, and so I suppose it's a little easier in that situation to gauge consent with a person. I mean, I even like I remember with my last girlfriend, before I kissed her the first time, I asked her, I said, "Could I kiss you?" And she said yes. And I continued that because we didn't really know each other very well, and we were still kind of, getting to know each other. And for the first little while, you know, a couple of times we hung out or whatever, I asked her first, you know, and it was never a mood killer. She was always kind of like, hey, that's kind of cute, you know. So I don't really understand that. But yeah, so I suppose I've never been in the sort of, you know, the thing that people always talk about when we're talking about consent, which is this drunken situation where both people are kind of drunk or whatever, and you know, I just kind of don't do that, and I suppose I would kind of I generally avoid that anyway. If I'm with a girl and that kind of thing is happening, I just take her to bed. In the actual sense, I take her and I put her in bed. You know, it's I don't, I'm not comfortable with that situation, so I don't have that experience. So I mean, I'd
Yeah.
probably just do the same thing though. Yeah.
I think, you know, here's my position on the fact: if you're worried that they're too drunk to consent, you don't know them very well, you don't have a long-standing relationship, you know, or even if you do, you just want to be, if you always want to be safe, wait until they sober up. Because if they really want to shag you, they'll want to shag you sober too. So, you know, just wait and then see what happens, because you're not going to lose out, you know. And if they don't want to shag you when they're sober, well, you might have just avoided a really bad situation. The other point is, if you don't care whether or not someone's too drunk to consent because you're so interested in having sex with them, then you're like a real creeper and stalker. And yeah, you might end up facing rape allegations, because if you are, you know, people are falling down, blacking out drunk, and you're still having your way with them, then yeah, you're opening yourself up to charges, or at least allegations. So, but
I feel like the problem.
yeah, you want to wrap it up, and then I'll hand it over to Cece.
Yeah, sorry, I've said a whole bunch of shit, but I feel like a problem is it focuses way too much on the person getting their nut off. You know, it's like, okay, or this poor guy is not, or woman, but it's generally focused on males. But you know, oh, this poor guy, you know, we're going to restrict all these guys from being able to have sex. Well, I mean, I'd much rather restrict guys from having sex than allow more rape. Basically,
Yeah,
it's a strange, you know, sentiment. I don't really get it, but yeah.
women are told to control our behaviors all the time to not get raped. We're told to not wear certain clothes, not walk in certain streets after dark, to not drink too much at parties, to not trust men, right? And so we have to modify our behaviors all the time. So to ask a guy to not have sex with a woman if she's too drunk to drive, then wait till she sobers up, I don't think that's a huge ask.
Teach me not to rape. Ha 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 ha. Trigger.
So, Cece.
Yeah, I also know Ahiyerno. And when I first heard this question, I said, oh, he just wants to hear us talk dirty. Isn't that it? Like, well, how do we say this so that it doesn't kill the mood?
You might be right.
Should we do a role play? Let's do a role play. I'm the girl and you're the guy. Let's go.
Oh, I'm the guy. Hey.
Hey, how's it going? Ooh, I've had so much to drink. Wow. Oh, look, my pants fell off.
I think you should just rest until you feel better.
No, that's a bad
God.
idea. I want to.
Stepping.
Oh, someone else is here. Please join in.
All right.
So true.
All right, that would not turn anyone on. So no,
I'm leaving.
You're so muscly. Look at those arms. Oh, I love it. Do you work out?
Never, never at all.
Michael promised never to try to be a woman ever again. Jesus.
Hey, I will express my, you know, however I like. Thank you very much.
You turned full Monty Python right there.
Hello, dear. Oh, I just love the sex, darling. You know, I don't know.
Yes.
Just gonna barge right into the clitoris and start rubbing the clitoris.
Got to charge straight for the clitoris like a bull at a gate. All right, Watson.
All right. But yes,
off with the kick point.
You could, and if there was no alcohol, you could sort of, and consent doesn't necessarily have to be verbal. You know, there's physical consent as well, where obviously someone is helping you out. So if you see something going on, you know, then that's a good thing. And if the person is just sitting there looking like a deer in the headlights, that's probably a cue to sort of say something like, are you okay? You know, but I would say, you know, you could always be like, do you like that baby, kind of thing, or would you like me to do this or something like that, if you're comfortable.
Yeah, talk dirty to me.
Shut up.
For some reason, I was picturing like, is this okay? Like, what the hell is that? Like, no, that's not okay. What the fuck?
Can we change the title of this? The Feminist
sorry.
Talk Dirty? Change the title to Feminist Talk Dirty.
That'll be the title of this episode. Yeah, this segment.
Sorry, I don't really know how to do this, to be honest. Yeah, what were you trying to do? Like, what were you trying to achieve? Like, I don't know. At least I asked, right? Like, yeah, okay.
You know, maybe you could get out the Kama Sutra and just point it at illustrations, like, well, this, you know.
Is this okay? Like, is that possible?
It's like, I don't know.
I need to stretch first.
Yeah, let's limber up.
Squat.
Anyway, this, I can't imagine this was helpful, but maybe it was. Tim, your turn.
Well, I mean, this is not really a question for me, because I feel like I would have to be like Dr. Drew or some crap, because the way I feel about it is like, you know, I'm not an expert on what individuals like. There's all kinds of different people. Like, some people like it, you know, all smooth and nice and friendly, and some people like it rough and ridiculous, and some people, you know, they need a safe word and stuff. But everything I learned about this I got from 50 Shades of Grey. So, you know,
That's a
just
reputable source.
go watch that movie with the dude.
That's,
and
no, that's.
I feel like that, like, when it comes to more, you know, like different stuff like that, it's all about communication, yo. You gotta, like, that's why I think it's kind of, you know, for me, you're not gonna know any of that stuff unless you kind of know the person a little better, and then you talk about things. And like, when it's been with someone,
Right.
when I've been with someone for a little longer, you know, it's always, I don't know, for me, it's like later on in our sexual relationship that more crazy stuff has happened. You know, it's not like something, you know, first time, let's go, bam, yes, just tie each other up and start poking each other with hot irons and shit. You know, that's
well, I mean, if you guys have seen that video that everyone was mocking, where they go for the constant consent, so he's all like, is it okay if I kiss you here? Is it okay if I do this? Is it okay if I take off your shirt? Is it okay if I move slightly to the left? Is it okay if I sit down on the bed? It's like, it just goes on and on forever. The problem with that PSA or whatever is that it assumes that every individual is going to have like this monolithic relationship where that is necessary, because once you've developed communications or, you know, some kind of standards with your partner, it's not always going to be necessary to do that. You're going to have like certain other cues which are going to give you a clue about what's okay. You know, if your partner is not doing something that they have been doing in the past where they were consenting, then you should take notice and be like, wait, something's different. Like, this isn't what we've usually been doing. But that ad is kind of like postulates that every single couple is going to have ongoing consent throughout the entire process. And I think it's not realistic, because, you know, what about people who are into kinkier stuff or crazier things? What about people who like need safe words or whatever? They're not turned on by that kind of constant consent, and I would argue it's not very realistic, and not many people are turned on by just constantly having to ask, you know.
Well,
so
I would
there has to
imagine,
be,
yeah, I would imagine, Tim, that, you know, for people who want to do those things, there's a point in their relationship where, like, well, you know, we dated, we're getting serious about things, and I think it's time we choose a safe word. You know, that's like a moment in a.
But I
think,
like, I couldn't. I guess
we've been on 3 dates now. I think it's about time we chose a safe word.
Yeah, exactly.
Kangaroo. I don't know.
Kristi. Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh, look out.
But I would say, like, you know, a lot of people see that ad and they're like, I've never had a single encounter with anybody where that was necessary. So how is that a good ad for like the general populace? And I couldn't picture ever being in a situation where I had to ask every 2 seconds. So I think, like, you know, in some cases, anti-fems have a point. Like, it was kind of right to mock that. But at the same time, you need to think of a realistic standard of consent and other ways of like having a standard of consent which is workable, you know. And they don't go for that next solution. They just mock. But it's right to mock that ad. But then what's the next step? I think the next step is like, every individual is different and they all have different understandings of consent, and they need to hash that out between them and their partners.
My problem is that they don't actually
everyone
want
else
to,
in the world.
they don't want anyone, or they don't want anyone, and they don't want to talk about consent anyway. You know, that there's no drive from that side to want to, that side in quotations, to talk about consent and things like that. You know, where the whole idea of you know, teach men not to rape and stuff. Well, yeah, we talked about this in the Bearing talk as well. Teach men not to rape was a reaction to, you know, the hashtag not all men thing, you know, which, you know, okay, on the surface, teach men not to rape, it could be slightly taken the wrong way, but when you look at it in a greater context, it's about teaching proper consent to people, you know, and having these conversations, which people don't seem to get, you know. And from that side, they don't want to, they just want to kind of obscure things. That there's no actual general discussion about consent. There's always just attacking any attempt for that to happen.
Well, you know, like, to me, the issue with that ad was just the frequency with which that couple had to ask each other, because some of those questions were realistic. Like, is it okay if I kiss you here or something? There's nothing wrong with that question. That's just the ad presents it like he has to say stuff like every 30 seconds or something, and that's not realistic. But there will be some questions coming up like that over the course of it, potentially. Like, is it all right if I do this, or is it okay if I do that? But saying like consent is like, well, consent, like actual consent is sexy, but like constantly asking questions isn't. So, you know. But of course, there will be a few questions like, can I kiss you here? Or like, can I do this? Can I do that? That's normal. But it will be like organic over the course of the event.
And the other thing is, it's not going to necessarily be one way or the other. You know, it depends on your relationship and the way that the things that you've talked about in the past and how you've talked about it. And you know,
sometimes there will be no words. Sometimes
it wants to get a word in.
Yeah, I do.
Sorry.
Because I think that there are some patriarchal assumptions about sex that are sort of embedded in this, as in sort of assuming that the woman is a passive partner and the man is the active partner. You know, you wouldn't need this in many sexual situations, because both people would be engaged, right? I mean, like, what what kind of experiences are you having where one person is doing everything and the other person is just sitting there passively? You know,
well, that's true. I mean, in that ad, the guy is asking everything. She's just like, yes, no, okay, maybe, no, yes.
So, I mean, it's supposed to be more of a mutual experience. And I think if you find yourself in an experience where one person...
Not just for me. I thought it was all about me.
Where one person is doing their best, like, statue impersonation, and the other person is just doing whatever. You know, I think you've got communication issues there above and beyond.
Personally, statues really turn me on.
That couple has just have a terrible communication in general, I suppose. Like.
You know, so it's just, you know, like I said, it doesn't have to be verbal. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be like, hello, sir, would you mind if I were to? You know, it's just that it could be a little
darling,
more...
it would be absolutely fabulous if we had sexual intercourse right now.
But, you know, like in the ad, he's like, is it okay if I take my shirt off? And she's like, no. And then they keep kissing. And then he's like, is it okay if I take off my shirt now? And she's like, yes. And it's like, I'm pretty sure in real life, he would just start to take his shirt off and she'd be like, nah, you know, don't do that.
Let's take it slow, baby.
Or is she just passive and she's just like nodding along or whatever? Or she has to say, no, don't take off your shirt. You know, I mean, it's just like not very realistic, like that whole scene. But maybe that's the problem is it's describing something that could be plausible if they just presented it less stupidly. That could be the case.
Yeah, but then they couldn't get it on the air, you know, if they were talking the way that
way over the top.
you know, so you're talking or doing things the way you would actually be doing stuff that would be X-rated. You couldn't have that on like a commercial.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well,
I
in
just think it's
real life,
stupid.
I would be like, I'm going to take my shirt off, and she'd be like, okay, or she'd be like, no. But
Yeah.
and
I
that
just
is
think it's
like,
stupid that this is
and
the
I
only
take
time
off
that
my
they,
shirt, and she's like, this is so sexy.
Mm.
I just
Every
think I
time
think
you
it's
ask the
stupid that
question,
it's
I
the
get
only
turned on
time
more.
the only time they talk about you know, consent is when they're critiquing in quotations anyone else's attempt to talk about consent. I think I've seen the ad, and okay, maybe it's kind of stupid, but at least it's an attempt to discuss consent. You know.
Oh yeah, but I agree that, like, you know, our quote unquote side could do better in terms of
Totally.
talking about it than that ad. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Could I just
and,
ask a question real quick? Could I just I'm not like, I don't have a little avatar thing, and it's not coming up on my screen with the little circles around it and stuff. Are you guys still hearing me okay?
Hearing you fine. My control panel shows that your camera is still broadcasting, but what I'm seeing in the thumbnail is a picture of you in a car.
There we go. I my camera thing was on, so I turned that off now, and
Excellent.
now I'm awesome
Okay,
in my
now you're
car
back.
looking like Tom Cruise. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, Kristi, before I reply on the consent thing, did you have anything else that you wanted to say before?
I did it. I think I forgot. Crap.
Well, to summarize, none of us have any useful, sexy ideas for you. So.
Well, I haven't
Sorry.
spoken yet. I haven't
Baby,
spoken yet.
I want you so bad. Tim, I just love your sexy
Spoke too
pics.
soon.
Yeah, baby. I want to lay you down by the fire.
Okay, so Michael's saying what not to say. Don't go. Oh, what you got?
I want to lay you down by the fire.
No, that's how you'll be spending the night alone, I think.
Challenge accepted.
Well, maybe you'll be reminded when I talk, and you guys have made a lot of the good points, and so I won't try to restate anything. But to get back to Cece's point, the idea that it doesn't always have to be verbal consent. You know, body language is very powerful. But that said, you know, I think it's incredibly romantic and sexy if you're with a guy and there's a, well, look, I'm with a guy. This doesn't really happen so much anymore, but you know, but in my experiences. And there's a sort of a frisson, a chemistry, and you know, if a man were to say, you know, I would really like to kiss you right now, or I can't stop looking at your lips, you know, or can't stop thinking about kissing you, that opens the invitation for, you know, the woman to say yes or no, without kind of putting her in a physically awkward position. But you know, once you kind of break that, you know, dip your toe in the water, as it were, you can do things just by, you know, I don't know if you've ever like had a kiss where someone comes in about 90% and then they stop, and then you have to come the other 10%, or they have to come the other 10%. Yeah, that's an
so
indication.
lazy.
So, you know, that's an indication of consent. It's an invitation that can be accepted or rejected, and you can move that logic to other parts of the body to go near something but not all the way, and then see if you get invited to go where you wanted to go in the first place.
Yeah, baby.
Kristi, I think you're saying a very similar thing to what I was saying before, which is that ad is not completely bunk because it's got some valid points in it, like saying, "Oh, can I kiss you?" or something. I mean, what's wrong? I'm pretty sure like that's a very standard thing to do. It's just when it presents it as like having to be reinstated every 5 seconds, that's where it gets stupid. But of course, there is a place for questioning or saying, "Is this okay?" I mean, you just have to read it like a sane individual, to be honest.
Yeah, and I haven't seen the ad. So when Kristi brought up the fact that it's always, or maybe Tim was, she brought up, anyway, and Tim, I think you said that it was always the man asking the questions, and Kristi said, you know, there should be, the woman should have been asking questions too.
I hadn't even noticed that. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was a really good point.
Patriarchy.
Yeah, damn it. And oh crap, I lost it again. I can't believe it. I'm such an every time.
Notepads. We need notepads.
It's this stupid cis white guy dominated conversation.
Oh my god. It was
we are
right there.
No, the number of
terminal
times I forgot what I was going to say on air is too many. All right, so how about we do one more question from the audience, and then we'll talk about our last two topics, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right.
So I'm going to... All right, hurrah. Lonely Wolf 1980 asks, what role does history play in sexual objectification, and how has this changed or evolved over time? So I'm not really like, I know a little bit about, let's say, art history, and that would be my frame of reference. But I had a conversation recently where I talked about my observation. I'm sure it's not original, but it struck me that Renaissance art in particular, but also Greco-Roman art, well, maybe a little bit to less extent, presents the male figure as sort of heroic and athletic, but not sexualized. If you think about David, he's not sort of posed like Richard, who was that guy who was posed in the 1970s? Richard Burton? No. Burt Reynolds, that was it. Burt Reynolds on a some kind of wild animal rug for Playgirl, right? That's not how they were portrayed. But women have always been portrayed as sexual or fertile or mothers or something to do with reproduction. And that's changing now as gay culture becomes more mainstream. You can have, especially, within that community, men presented in a sexy way. But the way that men have traditionally been presented to women as sexy, I tend to think of more like, the Bogarts or, the strong and silent types, men as hero figures. This sort of, again, distant, not really earthy and sexual and kind of like, whoa, foire, as they'd say in the UK. And I think that that's changing too. I was watching the last series of Strictly Come Dancing from the UK. There was a dance done with a guy who did this amazing salsa, I think it was. Anyway, it was hot. It was, there's a show they also have called Gogglebox where you watch TV and what you're watching is other people watching TV. And in the show, they had that dance with this guy with his open shirt and his very fluid hips and his very, very well-toned body, dancing to this sort of almost like a jungle version of sort of a carnival music, a mix of what the dances they were doing. So it was very raw and powerful. And one of the women said, how am I meant to look at his feet when he's got all that going on up there?
Yeah, baby.
And I was like, yeah. And watching all the females on that show react to him, well, the ones who are straight anyway, really being like, ooh, yeah, that looks really nice. It made me realize to the extent that I don't really have that reaction when I watch TV. And I think men have it every time they turn on the TV. So that would be my thoughts on the idea of history and sexual objectification. So who does anyone want to volunteer to go next? Because it's kind of a specialist question.
It's a tough one. Yeah, go, Chris.
I'm not sure exactly what some of the terms he's using, what he means by them. So does he mean that we objectify people sexually differently now than we did before? Or because I think our media is a big part of sexual objectification, and the bigger the media gets, the more that's going to be, to the point where we have just a porn industry that's enormous, which we've never had that sort of thing before. Like, there's always been sexual objective. Oh, hang on. All right, I'm gonna have to skip this, I think, this particular question.
Okay, no worries.
Crisis.
Anyone else want to come on? Yeah, Michael?
I mean, I'm not much of a history buff, but it seems to me that wouldn't like this idea that, I mean, I'm specifically thinking of like kings and their chosen brides and all that sort of business, the role of women in that situation. I suppose it's not really sexual objectification, but it's definitely like putting the role of woman into this kind of subordinate, only there to mother children, and that's their only purpose. That being something that is kind of part of our history as an English, all coming from that kind of patriarchy, society, the kind of king's castle-y kind of thingy. But like I say, I'm not very up on history, but it seems like that would play a role into to how things were, and I'm pretty sure that's kind of how things went in like lesser households as well. You know, it's women have been the subordinate, do stuff in the kitchen and mother all the children and da 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 da, and the man is the one that goes out and fights the wars and all that sort of business. It seems just something that's been ingrained into our society from all the way back then, you know. So yeah, that history wise, that's all I can really think of, I suppose.
Okay.
I think it's interesting, for instance, in the Bible, that so few women are named. You know, I forget what the math is on it, but there's something like several thousand men named and a couple hundred women who have a name. You know, they're there.
Yeah, there's that whole list of, you know, like in Genesis or whatever, with the whole list of the patriarch, you know, the going from like Adam all the way through to Noah or whatever it is, and it's all men. None of the mothers are named or whatever, you know.
Yeah, even just, you know, all the people around and people talking and people having agency. You know, it seems to be that for a lot of, when this got codified, when this got put in to the Bible as we know it, they just sort of assumed that men were the one who did things and were important and had agency, and women were probably, I don't know, baking, having children, dying in childbirth. We don't know. But, you know, it wasn't important to talk about them or to name them. So there's that kind of idea.
Sorry, what was the original question again?
Sure. What role does history play in sexual objectification, and how has this changed or evolved over time?
When they say sexual objectification, who are they referring to, men or women or everybody?
Well, I think it's the concept itself. And part of the challenge of this, of course, is that we have the concept of sexual objectification. And that's because of like social science and theory about sociology. And that's a rather new development. You know, that's modern era kind of stuff. So we're taking these concepts and trying to place them back on things like, you know, Greek society and their art and the role of men in male bodies. And the Romans and the Christians, but the thing is that they didn't really have the concepts that we're dealing with today. So that's one of the challenges.
I mean, this is not like, I'm not sure if I can offer much in terms of a historical perspective, but one thing that's interesting is, as you probably all know, like George Michael died recently, and I was just like getting into some of his music, you know, listening to some of his stuff. Like, he's got some pretty cool songs, like very talented guy. And I also watched some interviews with him, and he was just talking about struggling with his homosexuality in the 80s. And he basically had to like pretend to be straight, or at least he was confused until he was like 27 or 28 when he suddenly was like, no, actually, I'm gay or whatever. But he said how like every single sort of interview they would have, the very first question would be like, what's your sexuality? Are you straight or are you gay, or what's going on? And he said that he would just give like stupid answers because he got so sick of being asked that. And he said like, but deep down he was angry about it because he was like, it's none of your fucking business. Why do you keep asking me this? And he himself was confused. And I was thinking about that. I was like, why is that important to the media to know whether he's straight or gay? And I think partly it's because he was like this sexualized object to women in the 80s. And it seems like there's a lot of women who was like, you know, I'm never going to be with George Michael, but I hope he's straight because for some reason that's important to me, even though it's got nothing to do with my life. And that seems to be part of like the sexual objectification of George Michael. Like the opportunity to sleep with him needs to be there. So I hope he's not gay, you know?
Did you see the thing about Did you see the thing about the character in Overwatch about how Blizzard said that she's gay?
Oh yeah, and like everyone's just since like, oh no, this fictional character's gay. Oh god,
all these fanboys are freaking out. They're like, oh, this fucking she's gay.
And I was planning on sleeping with her. Oh wait,
yeah.
She's
now
fictional.
I can't jack off to weird hentai pictures about her because she's gay. It's so weird. You know?
Right, but that's a slightly different topic than what we were talking about. But it's just that, like, when I thought about like history, I thought about like what masculinity was supposedly in the 80s. It was like you could be really flamboyant, you know?
It's like you know, people have sexually objectified these people, you know, like and then they feel like their fantasies about that person are shattered because now suddenly they won't be interested in them or something, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, George Michael himself was struggling with being an incredibly flamboyant person who at the same time was not allowed to be who he was. So it's like
I'm
this
sure that the
dichotomy.
I'm sure that the character in Blizzard is also struggling very deeply with her identity.
Hmm. But it's sort of like, you know, you can be as flamboyant as you possibly want, but in the 80s, but you have to like be with women and you've got to be straight. Otherwise, I don't know what happens. Some kind of
Well, same
meltdown.
with like Elton John, right? I remember with you know, Elton John was flamboyant as fuck and didn't come out as gay for a very long time.
He had to pretend he was straight for ages.
I think
That's
that
ridiculous.
in the music industry is one example where male sexualization is on display, and it's for a specific market share. You know, teenage girls and maybe slightly older and some middle-aged women. But yeah, that
Jonas
is,
Brothers,
yes, that's the place
One
where
Direction, Justin Bieber.
that sexualization takes place and kind of traps, you know, men.
But
And that
I mean,
principle is then expanded to all parts of the media for women's, you know, women's bodies and women.
I was just going to say, like, I just think like George Michael is an interesting example now because like he was at the forefront of that whole kind of tension, you know, between like being a sexual object and being like an individual who, you know, you have to conform to like the sexuality of the mainstream, basically, you know, in order to be like objectified in the way that they want you to be objectified, you know. So I mean, I find that quite fascinating, but it's a little different than what the question was, but
yeah, still interesting. So we've been having kind of a light, fun show, and the other questions are pretty heavy. So I think what I'm going to do is save them for a more sober panel. Not sober as in not drunk, but as in...
Hey!
Let's not make any assumptions.
Yeah, sure.
Wait, how heavy are they? What do you mean?
One is about the legalization of prostitution and rape culture around the world, and the other one
We can
is
make this lighthearted.
Woo,
rape culture.
Michael.
Sizeism and discrimination and not being attracted sexually to oversized people. Or we could talk about the Bass F's video and being blocked by Sargon. It's up to you guys.
Oh yeah, let's do those things.
Right.
Yeah, I'd rather do the other ones actually.
Exactly. That's what you see. I take care of you guys. I'm looking out for you. All right. So the Baz F's video was one that came out just in the last couple days, and the theme of it was, what are the end goals of the anti-feminist movement? I found it really interesting because it was the first time I'd seen anyone make a video like that. And he had a lot of interesting questions and points and thoughts and self-reflections about what is YouTube, anti-feminism, and anti-social justice. What are their end goals? What are the principles that they're standing on and advancing? How are they doing that? And how are they accomplishing things to reach their end goals? And he had some goals about changing people's minds that seem to mostly focus on women's behavior when they're around the age of 20. To me, like, that seems to be his world in terms of judging how women interact with men, is when they're dating or in relationships or having families with them. But the rest, so I kind of, I watched like the first 15 minutes of it myself, and then I had something else to do, so I had to cut it short. But I thought it was a really interesting video, and I shared it to you guys and wanted to get some of your reactions. So I'm going to start with Kristiosity, if that's okay, if the background and everybody in the household is...
Hey. I thought it was really interesting. I really liked it, and I think that it's asking the right questions. You know what I mean? I remember, and this is something.
Oh, baby.
Yeah, he just woke up. He's mad. Yeah, he's mad because he just woke up from a nap.
No.
I don't like waking up either.
I know, me either. So, well, I just think I'm going to mute myself now. So, and let the next person take off.
All right. So, who else was it? Tim, had you not seen the video, or had you had a chance to see it?
I watched it this morning, and it was quite a fascinating video. It was very interesting because, yeah, he seemed to be interested in actually engaging with people. And the thing that I found really interesting about it is that he actually seems to be like, I don't think social justice warrior SJW is like a legitimate term. I think it's just an internet pejorative, which is poison the well and is really annoying. But he was using it in a consistent way to be like, the SJW people are the people who are like really hysterical and you can't talk to and they yell and I don't like them or whatever. But he was differentiating between those people and feminists, where I feel like these days people just lump everybody in with like SJW. So he said, you know, feminists are humans and they have concerns and we should try to have dialogue and conversation with them. They actually think things. They actually believe things. We can't just write them all off. And he did seem to put those people, like feminists or people who have like actual concerns and issues, in a different category than SJW. And while I think SJW is a stupid term, I appreciated the consistency. Like he's able to separate that, you know. Whereas a lot of people are just like, everything's SJ, like anything that is just vaguely disagreeing with me is SJW. Whereas he seemed to be more specific. So that was an interesting takeaway for me.
Great. Michael, did you have a chance to see it as well?
I watched it for a total of one Sargon, and I suppose I didn't get to see kind of the parts that you guys are talking about, I suppose. But I mean, I got that he was interested in seeing what because he talked about you know, not really knowing what other people's in game was because there's only interaction with those people has been just watching their videos for 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, or you know, 2 or 3 Sargons, and so he. It was interesting that he was taking that kind of self-reflective, you know, position. I mean, I've not watched a lot of his stuff in the past, but he made a video about one of my videos that I made about Sargon, and I actually really enjoyed what he did. He never seems to be a very like, you know, angry person or you know, being, you know, really vile or anything like that. He genuinely has these beliefs about whatever, and he seems to want to have a dialogue, which I think is quite interesting, and cool. I like that. Though he did say at about the 5-minute mark that he thought that feminism is and always has been about destroying society, which I thought was kind of
a little far.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because there are, you know, there are a lot of YouTube's pretty dominated by anti-feminists, and it seems to me so much that their only goal is to just like bash feminism, which doesn't really seem to do anything. You know, there's no dialogue.
He said that his big end goal or main concern is destroying the SJWs who are evil, but then at the end he said feminists have concerns and are actual people. So, you know, I was just thinking there's a difference between SJWs and feminists in his mind, I guess. You know,
Yeah.
compared to like other people who are just like, everybody is evil who disagrees with me. Like he wasn't doing that. He was saying like, okay, there's bad ones, and those are the ones that are called SJWs.
Yeah, that's kind of good, I suppose. I just think
good-ish. Well, it's better. It's not great, but it's better than what other people are doing.
Yeah, I just think I kind of agree with the idea that I don't see, I mean, because I don't see any kind of value to it, just a reactionary movement which is trying to hinder the process of a socially progressive movement. It just seems like a dick thing to do. And
well, I mean, but it
popular
just
at the
seemed to
moment,
me,
so.
you know, SJW, at least in Baz Fizz's mind,
Oh no, I'm not talking about him
sort
specifically.
of
I'm talking
means
about
something, you know.
Yeah. I'm talking about the anti-feminist movement in general, not to him specifically. I'm just saying that.
Oh right. Well, yeah.
Like,
To them, like feminism, SJW, whatever, leftist, everything's interchangeable. Marxist, it's just all the same thing. Regressive, it's just like basically, I don't like you, you're bad. That's it. Whereas he was at least willing to say like, okay, in my mind, it's a difference between SJWs and feminists, and it was like, huh, that's actually unusual because not a lot of people create any distinction anymore. So
yeah. I know. It's always.
I really like the sense of that he wanted to accomplish something, because I think that is missing. You know, that's something that when I talk to people about, say, Islam, I get a lot of that sense. Like you just, your end game is to be able to say mean things about Muslims. Like that's your concern here, that I should be allowed to say all these things about Muslims that I want to say. And, you know, when I say, well, what for? Like, what are you trying to do? What's
without pushback.
the goal of this? It doesn't seem to be much beyond the goal is to say the things I want to say.
Did you guys read the article? I can't remember his name, and I'm not sure whether this is a pseudonym or not, so I'm not going to say it. But the article about why I'm not an anti-theist anymore.
No, I didn't read it.
Yeah, I read it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, so for me as well, like, because for a long time I was very much like this anti-theist kind of thing, you know, atheist, and I'd argue with Christians and all that sort of business. But after a while, it became like, you know, like Chris was saying, you know, what's the end goal of that? Is it just to bash Christianity and bash religion, or is it to you know, to actually fix some of the problems that this religion has had on our society, you know? And after, you know, because we started eventually, as if first of all, there's all this kind of philosophical business where you're talking about the existence of God and the creation of the universe and all that sort of shit. But then, you know, after a while, it gets to the stuff like abortion and gay marriage and all that sort of stuff. And that was the stuff that was really the most important thing to me. You know, the idea that, you know, people can believe whatever the fuck they want, but as long as they're not impacting on the lives of other people. And for me, those were the issues that I thought were the most important. And so I don't really care anymore about, you know, whether God exists or not. It's, for me, it's the things that these people are forcing upon other people and inhibiting their rights, you know. And I think that's kind of my distinction between this, like, a reactionary movement and someone that's a movement that's actually making a difference in society, you know. I mean, there's the anti-theist, and then there's the whatever else you would call that, and, you know, one of them just seems completely stupid to me, and the other one, you know, is actually making a difference.
Well, I mean, when I think of my end game, it would just be the most amount of freedom for the most amount of people. However, I'm going to have a different, I'm going to have a different conception or perception of what that means. Like, for example, some people will think freedom is having like health savings accounts, where I'd say the best way to achieve freedom in healthcare is to have the most affordable and available healthcare. That is the best that it can be, and probably the way to get to that is universal healthcare. And then they say, no, that's tyranny. So we're going to have different perceptions about how to get to the same goals. Like, we're going to have different ideas of what it means to have the most free society for the most amount of people, you know. So we're going to be fighting about all the details about it. But I think a lot of people assume some kind of nefarious thing, but everybody's going to have their own certain goals. Like, some people, their goal is going to be to get rid of the gender pay gap, and then the moment you say that, people will say there is no gender pay gap, and you just fight. But I generally believe people are genuine about the things that they want, but people don't listen, and they just describe some ridiculous conspiracy to them. So just listen to what, and that's a good thing about Bass versus video. He was asking people. He was like, what is it? You know, he wants to find out. So he's curious, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, just on the end goals, and then I'll talk about the video and my perspective on it. But you know, when you were saying, Tim, about people agreeing maybe on the principles, but not on the paths to get there, I'm sure there are people who think that the way to freedom is a very small, limited government, that you don't have a lot of regulation, and that is, to them, freedom.
Exactly.
But to me, freedom is being born into a country where you get a good education, where there are good roads to drive on, and safety regulations so that your parents don't get injured at work and you don't get injured at school. And there's an equality in principle that people adhere to, so that you aren't discriminated against because of a characteristic over which you have no control and doesn't define you. That, to me, requires a government that's more activist and involved in order to guarantee those things. So, yeah, we can agree on the principles and then have debates on the methods of getting there.
Well, I think it's the difference between the freedom to live in a shithole or the freedom to live in a good place. And that's the main. We both want freedom. Just I feel that, like ANCAPs, for example, they want the freedom to live in a fucking feudalistic shitland, whereas I think people should have the freedom to live in a place where they have access to many good things.
Yeah.
and opportunities. So, okay, we've got a different point of view.
Yeah.
That was a bit
And then-
unfair to Ann Caps. I apologize. Anyways.
Yes, that was, yes. Disclaimer. The video that you guys watched was actually a follow-on from a first video that he did, which is a reaction, his disappointment in the community in terms of its reaction to Bering and Edgy Sphinx. And when Bering was outed as an IP thief, and the way people reacted, and then they went to hassle the Total Drama Island, but they got the wrong one because there were one with all caps and one with regular capitalization, and they were pouring all kinds of hate on the wrong channel. And he was just like, this is what we accuse the SJWs of doing, and I was really disappointed to see how people reacted to this. That was the first video, and then that was what was getting him thinking about the second. And he did seem to be genuinely reflective and realizing the extent to which there's a lot of heat but not a lot of light in what is being produced. And he mentioned Bering by name, and I think he might have mentioned Sargon, but I might be wrong about that, in terms of producing a lot of content, but what are you actually accomplishing? What are you achieving? And what are other people achieving as a consequence of watching your video? And are they being directed to something that actually has a concrete outcome? And yeah, I don't agree with his views. The idea that we didn't need first wave feminism, to me, is just sort of jaw dropping. But at least I feel like he's a sincere player. At least in this video, I don't know what his videos were like in the past, but in this moment in time, with this video that he made, that he's asking questions that the anti-feminist community should also be asking and making videos in response to. And I hope a lot of people do. So that was my bit.
I forgot that he
Yeah.
said that first wave feminism was bad too.
Yeah.
But you see, the thing is, obviously, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't intersectional, and black women were often excluded, and it was a very upper class movement. But it set the ball rolling, and it's been improved throughout time. So
he
I
just
would
literally
say,
said that feminism was and still is a movement that destroys society. That is going to destroy and is trying to destroy society.
Certain forms of feminism, like turfism, swerfism, white feminism, etc., are bad, but they don't represent feminism. They're the kind of like
but I don't think they're the kind of society. It's just
they're the kind of feminist movements that other feminists want to marginalize because they would prefer a much more inclusive, wide-reaching, wide umbrella feminism. So
but just the
I mean, if
assertion
there was
that
like
feminism
racism,
is destroying society is just that's so bizarre.
oh yeah,
I don't.
I mean, yeah, in general that's fucking stupid. But I mean, I think we all agree that feminism's not perfect and can be improved. I don't think anyone's
Nothing's perfect.
Yeah, just like any theory, if we
me.
all cast our minds back when Charles Darwin wrote On the Origin of Species, he didn't have the idea of genes and chromosomes and all of the genetic components of evolution because it was the first attempt at the theory, and then more data was collected and other people started to think about it and critique it and test it and push the boundaries, and information was brought together and synthesized. And it's the same thing with feminism. It's just, when we look back at prohibition in the United States, prohibition, the reason why it was an utter failure was because it was dealing with the symptom, not the problem. The problem was alcoholism. That was the problem that really was driving prohibition. But people looked to a legal remedy to try to restructure society. And in this case, without dealing with the social stuff, the legal stuff really wasn't going to make that much of a difference, kind of like with other things. So, but first wave feminism was critiquing women in the public sphere. And then second, reproductive rights, the private is political. And then we get into intersectional feminism. So yeah, the theories, as the good theories do, they become more refined. And, especially if you're looking across the world, you can't just have first wave feminism from the 19th century or the early 20th century imposed on places where it just won't fit. So yeah, you're going to get different kinds of critiques and applications of the theory and new findings or new ways of refining the theory as a consequence.
Also, I just was Googling it because I was curious, and it says that Darwin had a lot of the sort of casual racist views of his time. And he said that the sort of civilized people will replace the savage, quote, savage races throughout the world. So he had some racism going on.
Yeah,
you know?
Margaret
So-
Sanger. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood in the States, is often criticized because she was held racist views. But then almost
Right.
all of our founding fathers did as well. And we don't say we're
Yep.
not Democrats. People will say, well, feminism is, has this racist history. That's why I don't like to call myself a feminist. Well, you can also say democracy has an incredibly racist, sexist, classist history. But you don't mind saying I believe in democracy and I consider myself a Democrat, small d Democrat. Right.
Yeah, and then I could just say like, oh, some MRAs say some hideous shit about women, therefore MRAs bunk. It's the same kind of logic. It's just like, it's probably theoretically possible to be a decent MRA without saying disgusting things about women. So,
are we ready to move on from Bass F? Anyway, basically, we all had a really positive reaction to his video. I'll throw it to Cece. Yeah, see if it's okay. If the background sounds okay. Cool. Go ahead.
Yep, we're good. So yeah, Bass. I would rather have a conversation with a person I totally disagreed with, but who had an open mind and a willingness to engage, rather than someone who's just, a lot of the people that I talk to that come to my videos, they have very preconceived notions, and those aren't going to be changed. And I can, a lot of times I just get to the point with them where I say, okay, I've given up on this conversation now. We're just going in circles, it's a waste of everybody's time here. So, the idea that somebody is going to be thinking deeply and critiquing his own ideas, other people's ideas, thinking about things at more than just the surface level, is I think great. I told Big Lundy, he does that chats, that he should get in touch with Bassefez. Is that how he pronounces it? Bassefez? I don't know.
Base Fizz.
Base Fizz. He should talk to
that's-
Base Fizz and have a hangout. I think that would be interesting to watch him.
Also, the thing I forgot was that he's also he's Christian, right? So he comes at it from like a sort of Christian conservative perspective. I mean, that was my impression. Am I just making that up, or?
Don't know.
I think you might be right. Yeah.
He has very traditional ideas. He was talking a while about family and respect and people having stable environments for children, all of which are, you could understand.
Something he said struck me. He was like, I want the traditional family, and I want things to be like, he sort of went down the list of like conservative family values. But then he said, like, if other people want to love each other, like if gay people want to be married and love each other, like that's fine. It's none of my business. And I really respected that. I was like, okay, so he's willing to also say, I want, like, other people can have rights. Like I would prefer, like, people to be straight, I suppose, and to have nuclear families. But if there's a gay couple down the road and they love each other, that's fantastic. And I was like, great. That's really good. That's how people are supposed to think. They're supposed to be like actually tolerant of other people living their own lifestyle. Even if they've got their own specific view about like how the family should be, or like the nuclear famwant and etc. He was willing to say, but I was, people can be gay. What's the problem? That's awesome. And he was like, if they want to have gay marriage, fine. What's it got to do with me? And I was like, yes, that's great.
Did you see the? I put a video. I linked a video on my Facebook about it was a Jim Sterling video, and he was talking about a game where they'd implemented an invincibility mode. Like if you wanted to play the game, and you couldn't die, so you could go through it, you could play the game, but there was no way you could die. And the uproar from like the elitist gamer, a lot of people, when they were implementing a completely optional mode in this game, the uproar from these people about how awful that was, how it's just like, you can't, just gonna let babies play the game now, and it's just like
we don't want options.
This like ridiculous entitlement and like of something that's not going to affect your life at all. When other people are allowed to do things that it seems kind of the same thing for me. When marriage has had this extra option added to it, for some reason, all these people will go fucking nuts. It's like, but it's got nothing to do with you, and it's not going to affect your marriage at all. It's not going to affect
well,
anything to do with your life at all.
he also
It's just
mentioned
strange.
unwanted children. He was like, there's too many people having kids that are unwanted. And I totally fully agree with that. You shouldn't have a kid if you don't want a kid. That's fucking stupid. But then the next step for me and the next challenge for Mr. Bassfizz or whatever would be, then what about gay adoption? Because if you're all right with these gay couples being married and they love each other.
What about birth control and abortion and all that sort of business?
Oh, he said, well, I don't think he mentioned abortion because that's probably, or maybe no, I don't think he mentioned that because I think that's more controversial. But he did say birth control and whatever. Yeah. So he's open-minded on that too. So,
I
was like, well, what about the next step?
Restrict
gay couples adopting?
I just think it's stupid to restrict reproductive rights and then also be like, well, it's really unwanted children. Yeah, you're fucking.
Oh yeah, but Bassfizz wasn't doing that either. He was said
cool.
when he's birth control. I was like, wicked. This guy's nailing it.
I dig it.
Yeah. Good stuff.
So
anyway,
last topic is Sargon.
Way.
Mm-hmm.
So who wants to go first? I guess there's sort of two Sargon stories that we can talk about that are related to feminism. Well, no, one's related to feminism. One's related to somebody here. Yeah, because he just did that. Kevin did a video about his tweet about demonstrating Scarlett Johansson is an evidence that the patriarchy.
Did Kevin make a video about it? Cool.
Yes. So, but is that the one you wanted to talk about, Michael?
I remember that.
Yeah. Well, he tweeted about that Scarlett Johansson thing at you, Kristi, and was like, I can't remember what the tweet said exactly, but it was basically just like, nah. Look, there's a successful woman, therefore patriarchy doesn't exist, and I retweeted it as, hey, look, it's hot in my hometown, therefore global warming doesn't exist. And he didn't get it, and a bunch of his followers didn't get it, and that's kind of where the whole private conversation.
You mean you sent him a sarcastic tweet and he didn't get it?
Oh my God! Wow. he just also didn't get the analogy. Like, it's pretty much perfectly analogous. You can't like look at an outlier and then say, therefore this thing doesn't exist. And for me, it also kind of illustrated how he doesn't understand what patriarchy means, and his followers as well, because this woman was like, if there's a successful woman, then patriarchy can't exist. And I was like, yeah, because that's exactly what patriarchy theory talks about. You understand it completely. It means that no woman can be successful ever. When we say patriarchy, it means that women are oppressed and none of them are going to be successful. It's
black president, there's no racism.
Yeah, exactly. We had Obama as a president, therefore there's no racism.
Yes. Problem solved.
That means the moment Trump comes in, racism's back, apparently.
Yep. Exactly.
Oh no, racism came back. Trump's in the office.
So yeah, I just thought that was really stupid. But he does that shit all the time, and his followers swallow it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah. What Kevin pointed out in his hangout was that once again, Carl didn't read the article. He just tweeted. He tweeted out based on the headline, because if you read the article, it showed that actually Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, earns more than Scarlett Johansson. For the quality and types of films, he makes more money. And that actually, if Carl had read the article, he would have seen that it's actually an example of the way that men systematically hold a disproportionate amount of positions of power and wealth and status in a society, and that perpetuates over time. So yeah.
But you know what's funny? You know what's stupid is like when a woman in power like that, say Emma Watson, points out that she didn't earn as much as her, co-hosts or whatever, co-stars, co-actors, they would just be like, oh, poor Emma Watson and all her millions of dollars. Look, she's so oppressed. Or
the other one is, oh, she's not a good negotiator, so it's her fault she's not getting paid as much money.
You can't fucking win. It's just you can't win at all.
Sure.
Here's an example of patriarchy. No. It's stupid.
Yeah. I mean, the series, people do try to, I haven't seen many of them because I'm too busy making videos, but there are some people who are trying to, take down my evidence for the patriarchy, but.
Okay. Yeah, as they do,
Yes. So the other thing, is it okay to bring it up, Tim? Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Yeah, you want to tell us the story? Yeah, tell us.
Well, I mean, okay. Well, the backstory of this is basically like Sargon has this history of making these stupid petitions, which are goofy. The one like Dare Universities, stop teaching social justice or some shit. like trying to dictate to every university what the fuck they're allowed to talk about because he doesn't like it because it offends him or whatever. So recently, this professor dude on Christmas was like, "I'm dreaming of white genocide for Christmas" or something, and he explained that as like he was just fucking around, he was just being a jerk, and it was a joke or something. But then people like dug up some articles he wrote about Haiti where he said the slaves should have killed all the whites or something because you know, they would have a fear of being re-enslaved and stuff. And as far as I could tell, that was basically just a historical analysis of that situation. I don't know for sure whether he was condoning it or just saying that that was practically what the slaves should do to preserve themselves or something. Like, there's probably some nuance there. But basically, Sargon got offended, as he does, and he flipped out. And he was like, well, I don't know if he flipped out. Maybe he was very calm. He was like, oh, I'll just make a petition about this. So then, generally, I think when you make a petition, it should be something like, we want to tell you how we're dissatisfied, how we don't like this, how this is a bad thing, and put in like a protest about it. And I think that's fine. But his petition said, we want to see the private meeting between him and the disciplinary board, and we want it to be public. And I can't see the purpose of that besides like public shaming. Like, basically, we want to put him on trial in public because we were so offended because we're such special snowflakes about what he said was a joke, and which in any other circumstances people would say like, yeah, that was just a joke, let it go, you know, he doesn't really want to genocide Muslims or whatever, you know. But you make it about white people, like, oh my god, this is offensive, this is, oh, feelings are so hurt, we want a public trial, we want public shaming, we want to just, you know, shame, walking behind him with the little bell like ding ding ding. So I was just mocking him for his fucking hypocrisy, which is just out of this world. And it's like, and then he's like, oh, you know, SJWs want to use these tactics, but then complain when we use them. And it's like, yeah, because you always complain about those tactics. Like, stop complaining about the tactics if you want to use them. That's called being a hypocrite. And they're like, what are we supposed to do? Not fight back? No. How about make a petition which just says, we don't like what this guy said, and we've got a real problem with it, and we think he should be disciplined, and maybe he should be fired, and there should be like protest about it. Okay, but don't just say, we want to see the private meeting be public so that we can put him on public trial and public shame him because we're whiny, offended little losers. Don't say that. So, okay, now I'm just getting up to like how I got blocked or whatever. He was like, oh, I'm so tired of people virtue signaling about their pet causes or whatever. Yesterday, whatever. So I was just like, yeah.
Did this. He said that.
Yeah,
oh,
he tweeted that out just randomly, like, people are always virtue signaling about their pet causes. And I was like, well, you virtue signal about your pet causes all the time. Like, for example, your stupid petition, you know, you virtue signal about, like, this is so, the racism against white people and the establishment is so unacceptable. I must tell everybody, make a petition so they can prove to everyone I'm so pure. And just like, I care about racism so much. Like, that's fucking virtue signaling. So I gave him shit about it. And he was like, oh, you're not going to like this now. And then he blocked me. And as far as I'm concerned, like, okay, you know, everybody gives Steve Shives shit about blocking. And I think they're fair to do that. It's just freedom of speech. Like, if they don't like it, they can say, hey, but, you know, but Steve's terrible because he blocks and stuff. But I have always maintained people can block as they want. And when people ask me about Steve's blocking, I just say, like, that's his personal choice. But I think it's a bit rich when Sargon goes on and on and on about, like, oh, Steve is so bad, and then he blocks me. It's like, I don't care about being blocked by this guy, because it's like, well, I do care in the sense that I'm missing out on a lot of funny stuff because he's hilarious, because he says so much dumb shit that every day I'm just like, I can't believe he says something this stupid. But I could just get it through Tom Bloke, you know, my doppelganger. He can show it to me. But I'm going to miss a lot of lols, a lot of just hilarity and just hypocrisy and stupidity. But it's just like, you know, you can't keep complaining about shit and then you do it yourself. What's the deal with that? Is the penny going to drop? Like, oh my god, I am what I hate? Is that Sargon's law, as far as I can tell, means Sargon does stuff that he whines about. And it's about him personally, you know? Projection, basically. That's how
when I confronted him about it, that was basically his retort and his fans' retort as well. As, oh, I'm blocked by you, so da da da. And I was like, that's completely irrelevant because I don't care about people blocking other people. I do it all the time, and I think it's funny, and people can block all they like, but you guys always go on about special snowflakes and their fucking echo chambers and da 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 da. And as far as I'm concerned, this is like you know, reinforcing of his echo chamber, because if anyone's in a fucking echo chamber, it's that motherfucker, because he'll retweet something and he'll get nothing but fucking hundreds of dick sucking assholes coming along just being like, oh, Sargon, you're so smart, look how funny you are, oh, look at the things, like retweet all the time. And then one person comes along and is just like, you're a fucking idiot, and he just fucking flips out, and he's like ridiculous, and so he's stopped one person from infiltrating his little tiny echo chamber. It's ridiculous.
All right, but I feel like
hypocritical.
he's got like TJ Kirk, or the Amazing Atheist. At a certain point, he decided, I don't give a fuck about hypocrisy. I don't give a fuck about, if someone says I'm a hypocrite, I just say fuck you, I don't care. And I feel like Sargon's going down that path now. He's just like, I don't care about being consistent. I don't care about being a hypocrite. I just like don't care. And I was like, that's fine. But
yeah, I mean,
can we at least note that? Just like, all right, you're completely full of shit and everything, because you make these whiny petitions and now you're blocking people, and stop pretending that you have any fucking values. It's just becoming a joke.
Can I jump in, because I'm gonna have to go pretty soon?
Yeah, go.
So I just want to say I get so annoyed when I hear this argument constantly from, I've had it, I'm not kidding, twice yesterday, of people saying SJWs do this, SJWs block, SJWs do this. I have people who come to my channel to ask why Kristi Winters blocked them on her channel. Like,
I'm
are
not
you
Kristi. Yeah, I'm someone else.
But they're blocked, and they'll say things like, doesn't this show that Kristi can't accept any criticism? And I go, no, it doesn't, and
All right, yeah, I mean,
so
I don't care.
I have this, it's like, it doesn't, none of this matters. And I had the same argument, and Sargon is somebody that they used as this example of how we're all cowards, but someone like Sargon is very, very brave and always talks to people. And I'm like, are you kidding? I know several people who've been blocked by Sargon, and it's not Sargon.
Hashtag block by
Carl,
I've tried to set up, like, I said to Sargon, hey, let's do well, he came to me, he was like, oh, you talking shit about me, let's do a hangout of it. And then we set it up for the weekend, and then I was like, where were you? You didn't show up. He's like, I forgot. So then we arranged another one, and then he forgot again. And then and then another time he was like, oh, don't be a pussy and do a hangout or something. And we're like, yeah, but you always forget. And then he's like, oh, maybe you're just not that important. Well, make it your fucking mind. Like, do you want to? Obviously, he doesn't want to face me because he'd rather block me. So I'm right here, but he doesn't seem capable of setting up a hangout with me because I'm not important enough. So good for you.
I made this, the thing about debates is it just because somebody doesn't want to talk to you doesn't mean they're in an echo chamber. And just because somebody doesn't want to jump in on every chat stream, every set up debate kind of thing, because I don't really see that internet debates are all that productive. So
yeah, everyone's like, you pussy. Ugh.
It's I'm not
debate me.
I'm just not that, I would if I thought it were going to be productive. If I thought that there was something worth debating and somebody worth debating with, not to be too rude, but it's like
That's
they
not
just
every
want me
loser
to
in your
come
comment
on, and they're just like, they don't even say, like, they'll say debate me, and I'll say about what? And they don't
keeps
know.
saying debate me, and then he messes me around. He forgets, and he doesn't keep his promise.
Well, if I was Sargon, I wouldn't debate anybody ever again anyway. Because honestly, he has
got
been
the shit kicked out of him. Yes.
Well, Kristi, and then also Michael Brooks. Like, I've seen, so it wasn't like he was just having that one bad night. The only person he looked reasonably competent with was Thunderfoot, who's terrible. He was
also recently he had a debate with Red Panels, who is this like cartoonist, And red panel's arguments were just a soup of feces. Like the worst arguments I've ever fucking heard. I was like, your child could beat him at an argument. So
Yeah,
oh
so
god,
I
they were
mean, if I
terrible.
was him, I would pick all my battles very carefully. But I mean, at the end of the day, all that really tells you is who sucks more at debating in an internet scenario, you know. I mean, I think Kristi's debate had a good structure.
Red panels was the worst. Oh my god.
But
It's like, wow, you make Sargon look like a genius. Like, it's
Yeah.
terrible.
I love
so
that Michael Brooks debate. It was just the greatest thing ever. He smeared the floor with him.
well, because you know, Kristi was nice, but Michael Brooks was not nice. Michael Brooks
No.
decided at a certain point, oh, I've got this guy, and just
Well, he said I think he was like,
smacked
I
him
will
around.
I'll have answers to I'll have answers to the questions I asked, or I will have nothing.
Mhm.
And that was it. It was like, if you don't answer my question, I'm gonna keep smacking you. Like, answer my question.
I'm just gonna
Yeah.
bat you around. And it was a very simple question that just should have been, you know, pretty easy. It's like if I was going in on a debate about patriarchy and somebody asked me, well, what is patriarchy? I think I could answer, you know. So he wants to debate regressive left and he doesn't have a definition of that. He doesn't have, you know, other than to say, well, you that's you.
You're one. Yeah.
You
Look it in the mirror.
Well, what makes me regressive?
that
Being
thing you just did
yourself.
right then. You said that thing, and that's totally a regressive thing to do. That thing there. Yep,
Like,
that's regressive.
Okay.
Oh, only regressive would do that.
Yeah. Oh wow, look at that. Regressive as fuck.
So
Anyways, I mean, my final point on the just.
Oh, actually, can Kristi make her point because she's on a time schedule? So
yeah.
Oh, sure.
So it's just,
Jesus.
I think that they need to stop all this, you know, different rules for different folks, because when you point out, you know, when you point out Sargon's been avoiding debates and blocking people, you know, maybe he doesn't do it as much as somebody, but he does it, and he does it to people that annoy him because they disagree with him. So there's always an excuse for it. There's always like, well, you know, but they accept no excuses in the world. Because if I say, well, I will block you if you start calling people slurs, because I'm against that. You know, that's my policy. So if you did that, I would block you for that. Oh no, it's because you're a coward and you're afraid. You know, it's like, no, I'm not afraid of idiots on the internet, but that doesn't mean I want to talk to them all, you know, no matter what they say to me. That's ridiculous.
I can predict why he might have done it. It was probably just like, oh, I was just doing an experiment to trigger him. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, and that's fine, but it doesn't matter. You know, whatever your reason, I can say, well, I was just doing it because, you know, I was
trolling you.
I was trolling you and shit posting and this and that and all this other stuff. But
Schrodinger's douchebag.
It's just a meme.
It doesn't matter why you did it. You did it. So just
yeah,
shut
like,
up.
oh, I make the whiny petition because I'm using your own medicine against you. Ha 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 ha. And that's just like a very convenient way of saying,
I'm a
I don't care
hypocrite.
about being a massive hypocrite. Ha ha ha. Gotcha.
But the difference is that when we make petitions, we don't address them to buildings, you know, dear universities. and when we ask for things, we don't ask to violate potentially state law on the confidentiality of employee disciplinary meetings or pay meetings or anything else. You know, I mean,
that's just
as
stupid.
Tim said, you know, if you want to say, hey, we disagree with this, all these people, that's fine. But to make a demand, like,
Well, have a protest. Protest is normal.
Well, I think.
Well, I have to go, so
yeah,
I'm just gonna say goodbye and then
been great
leave.
having you.
Bye.
Cool.
Bye, Chris.
Bye. Good chatting.
Yes. Well, actually, that was going to be about the time I was going to wrap it up as well, unless you guys have any other points that are outstanding that we didn't get a chance to address before.
Oh, the final thing on the blocking I was going to say was, I already said this before, but I think it's worth like re-saying, is basically I don't care if Sargon blocks me because I respect people's blocking choices. Even if it's done as a troll, everyone wants to block me, everyone wants to mute me. That's just like freedom. You can do whatever the fuck you want online. I made a conscious decision to not block people, but I actually have 2 people on the block list. So I'm not, my hands aren't clean there. I blocked one guy who said he would dox my fiance because I just got pissed off. And I was like, well, fuck you. I can't be bothered having this guy threatening me. And I blocked Cav for leaking my private info to Bering because it pissed me off. So I blocked him. So I got 2 people on the list. So I just asked that Sargon would be consistent and open about it and say, yeah, sometimes I get triggered. It's just a joke there. I hope that joke didn't trigger you. Sorry, it's trigger inception. I just wish you'd be consistent on it and just say, yeah, sometimes I block people because I can't deal with stuff. And that's fine, but just be consistent and just be honest about it. And that's all I ask. Steve's honest about it. He's like, yeah, I made this decision because X, Y, and Z. Just Sargon, be open about it. And then that's fine. I don't care.
I just think, like, for me, it's such a huge talking point of theirs is how special snowflakes always get triggered and want to block people and stay in their safe spaces and like Miley Yiannopoulos goes on about it all the fucking time, and it's a huge like thing to beat feminists with, that they are just like these fragile little flowers who can't stand criticism and and it's just the most fucking hypocritical bullshit ever. So like, it's certain, like someone like Sargon doing that, I think is kind of a big thing, because I mean, I know that people are going to rationalize it, because of course they're going to, but it's just the most fucking hypotcritical.
Oh yeah, Steve's open about it. He says why. He's like, I do it because I can't fucking stand you people, so I block you.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, I block people as well. I got fucking heaps of people blocked, and I mean, half the time I do it because it's fucking hilarious, and people, it's joyous to me to censor people, because that's totally what I'm doing.
Monster.
Yeah, it's an Orwellian nightmare, and so we, I have no problem with that, and so see, for me, that I'm not a hypocrite because of that, because I say and do the same thing. Like I practice what I preach, but Sargon's not doing that, and he's not, and he's not doing what he has done said for a long time, and is not doing what all these other motherfuckers have said for a long time. With the
petitions and everything. But hey, if anyone wants to block me, whatever, it's part of the options of Twitter. Like, I can do anything about it. That's life.
Yeah, on my channel, my basic policy is, if you said it to me to my face in the street and I turned around and walked away, I don't want you in my chat room. So, people will say, oh, you don't want criticism. But what they do is they write a criticism, and in the middle of it, they call me retarded, or they end by calling me a cunt. Well, I'm not going to then show you the politeness of writing a response to your criticisms, because you've shown me no respect. You've done the opposite, actually.
Yeah,
came to my channel. I
respect that.
Yeah, you left a comment.
Your individual choice.
Yeah. And so, if you come on there and your only comment is to complain about the fact that you can't downvote it, you're out, because you're not contributing anything.
I wouldn't block them, but I don't judge other people for blocking them. I'm like, they're a different person than me.
Thing.
Yes, someone commented last night, and they said something like, "Oh, comments and downvotes are disabled. Typical feminazi. The Nazis would be proud of you." And I was like, "Wow, you either you don't know what the Nazis did, or you just like, wow."
Well, Hitler disabled votes as well. Technically he did.
And the thing is, when you show up to someone's channel, you're a guest. You're watching their content, and if you behave poorly and you get kicked out, then that's on you, because you drew attention to yourself and did something. Now, maybe it was inadvertent. If you think it was inadvertent, then reach out to them and ask, hey, what's going on? But
Steve unblocks people all the time. Like he I see people be like, hey, Steve, you've blocked me on your thing. Can you unblock me? And he's like, yep, sweet. And he unblocks them, and it's fine.
Well, I mute people because sometimes people clutter up my Twitter with just so much spam and stupidity. I just like, you're just totally destroying my feed. Just to fuck off, and I mute them. But I can still see them if they reply to a tweet chain. So sometimes I catch someone I've muted. And sometimes I'm like, I just unmuted someone now because they were like, could you unmute me? And I was like, you can stop being spammy? And they're like, yeah, maybe. I was like, all right, well, I'll give you a little trial and unmute you. So, but I don't block.
People because
except for those two people.
I'll have have a tweet chain, and there'll be like one person talking to no one, and I'll be like, hey, what's going on here? And I'll look, and it'll be someone that I've blocked at some point, but I just don't remember, and so I'll unblock them. And then maybe I'll remember why I blocked them and then block them again, or I'll just leave them unblocked, you know?
Change your mind, or yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that people probably don't know, because unless you have a channel, you don't see how these things are handled from the creator side. And on our end, if you block people, the interface is terrible. It's this sort of sort of scrolling list of names within a larger frame within a larger frame. It's not an alphabetical order that I can see. It doesn't seem to be by date. So, and the other thing is when you're working with comments, whether you're approving them or, you know, banning someone or deleting a comment or making someone a moderator, the screen can sometimes move because there's a big lag, at least for me. When I click a button and I make a selection, I might be on to the next one, and I'll go to do something on it, and it'll actually move the screen while I'm doing it, and I click it, and suddenly, you know, I've made a mistake. So if you think you've been, you know, deleted an error or banned an error, then just reach out to the creator on Facebook on their page if they have one, or on Twitter, and just ask. Because if we, you know, if you ask us and we check it out, you know, we'll fix it. But if you're a jerk again and you're just doing it to get unblocked so you can swear at us, then you're gonna get blocked again. So don't waste your time. At least that's my policy. So
yeah, pretty much.
Q.
Well, hey, this was a really great talk. And so if you guys want to
Yeah, it
hang
was.
around a little bit off air, just so we can wrap up like amongst us. But for those of you listening, I hope you guys enjoyed, which something I found to be a very enjoyable chat, laughed a lot. And it's always great to talk to Kristi, to Michael Rollins, and to Tim.
Nailed it.
So thanks you guys for watching to the end of the video. I've been Kristi, you've been awesome, and I will see you guys again really soon. And bye from all of the guys. Yeah. Bye from a Tim.
Bye. See you later.
Bye. Bye.